Choosing you was the easy part, asking you was the hard one, Serena said with a grin. I know it might sound a little unbelievable, Brady added, but we chose you because of your intelligence, charm, respectfulness, good looks, and overall fitness. You're a wonderful father and an exceptional man. We thought it would be amazing if our child could inherit some of those qualities. I was speechless and deeply moved. I've only cried a handful of times as an adult, but that day became one of them. I cried like a newborn. You know, I began, trying to pull myself together. If it helps, I could sell you my half of the house so you can. No, 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 Brady cut me off quickly. We don't want you to go anywhere. We want you here. She looked at me sincerely. We were kind of hoping you'd help us raise this baby, just like you and I raised Emmeline. I think we did a pretty good job, don't you? Truth be told, I was proud of the way we raised our daughter, and I genuinely enjoyed the experience. I had wondered how Serena might feel about it, but she clearly had already considered everything. She chimed in, there's research showing that kids do well when both a mother and father are present. Just imagine what this child could gain: two moms, a dad, and a big sister all before Emmeline heads off to college. Serena's eyes welled with tears, and I managed to choke out, I love you all so much, as tears streamed down my face. That evening, over dinner, we shared the news with Emmeline. She jumped out of her chair, hugging Brady and Serena tightly. Wow, I'm going to be a big sister. How amazing is that? She exclaimed, her joy lighting up the room. 2 months later, Brady, Emmeline, and I anxiously waited as Serena emerged from the en-suite bathroom of their bedroom. When she stepped out, tears of joy in her eyes, we rushed into a heartfelt group hug. It was overwhelming. Just over 13 years ago, I thought I'd never have the chance to be a parent. Now, I was just months away from welcoming another child. Family, I realized, comes in many forms. I always admired Emmeline's intellect and her growing emotional maturity. She handled our unique family dynamic with grace, even when classmates occasionally made comments. Despite the complexities, Brady not being straight, Brady and me not being married, all of us having different last names, Emmeline rarely complained about any hardships. As our family continued to grow and diversify, we decided to keep Emmeline's original last name, the one on her birth certificate. We knew people would talk, and indeed, some adults weren't very accepting. But kids tended to be more open, and Emmeline remained popular at school. She often brought friends over from the soccer team or band, and they were always welcomed into our home. While some grown-ups whispered behind our backs, the gossip usually quieted when we were around, possibly because few dared challenge me, and even fewer were willing to take on Brady's razor-sharp tongue when she stood up for our family. Emmeline ultimately graduated as the second highest-ranking student in her class, earning the honor of delivering a speech at commencement. Although I've always had a way with words, when I offered to help Emmeline with her graduation speech, she gently declined, saying I had already done enough and didn't need to contribute further. Curiously, she never rehearsed it in front of me or Brady and Serena. It became clear I'd be hearing it for the first time along with everyone else at the ceremony. On graduation day, Brady, Serena, and I arrived at the gym with little Ryder Ashton Ellis, now nearly a year old. We were often stopped by women admiring the baby, which slowed our progress to our seats. Emmeline's speech was the second on the program, and I smiled as I read its title, There's No I in Team. Her message focused on the strength of collaboration, how shared effort can overcome individual shortcomings. She used our family's unique makeup as an example of 5 very different people forming a strong, unified team. I know I stood a little taller that afternoon. Her words moved many in the crowd to tears. Later that summer, we all traveled to Arizona to drop Emmeline off at Arizona State University for her freshman year. We left Santa Fe 5 days early to enjoy some sightseeing together before saying our goodbyes. When it came time to part ways, we lined up for farewell hugs. I ended up last in line, something I later realized probably wasn't by accident. As we embraced, she leaned in and whispered, Dad promised me you'll try harder to find a good partner. She paused, then added, I know it wasn't a priority while I was home, but now that I'm leaving and Mom has Serena, you deserve someone too. I'll try my best, I whispered back. But no promises. Good partners like Serena aren't easy to find, you know. It felt natural when Ryder began calling me Daddy as he learned to speak. Every time he said it, my heart swelled. What surprised me was that he referred to both Brady and Serena as Mommy. I couldn't tell the difference in how he pronounced it, but somehow, they always knew which one he meant. 2 years after Emmeline graduated from ASU, she honored me in a way I'll never forget, asking me to walk her down the aisle. That was my main role in the wedding, as she, Brady, and Serena joyfully took charge of the rest. My other duties included financial support and keeping a lively 7-year-old Ryder entertained. Though James Lawson seemed like a fine young man, I couldn't resist giving him a firm warning. hurt my daughter, and I will intervene. He took it well despite the one-armed chokehold I had him in at the time. Call me overprotective, but I had to make sure he understood the gravity of his role as her husband. Despite being in my mid-50s, I stayed in good shape, hitting the gym 3 times a week. The wedding itself went off without a hitch. I made it a point to soak in every moment of Emmeline's big day, chatting with guests at every table, enjoying the food and drinks, and dancing with a number of women. While I was chatting with a group of friends, a spirited woman with shoulder-length silver hair streaked with purple suddenly approached. Without a word, she grabbed my right hand and pulled me toward the dance floor. "Do you have a height requirement for your dance partner, stud?" She joked as she pulled me onto the dance floor, drawing laughter from the group nearby. "In case you're wondering, I'm Aunt Deb," she said with a wink once we found our rhythm. "I'm Jax's mom's best friend. Used to change your new son-in-law's diapers back in the day. My nephews told me great things about you," she added with a playful grin. "Also warned me about your legendary chokehold." She smiled brightly, her blue eyes full of spark. As we danced, I couldn't help but notice her toned, athletic build. She moved with the ease of someone who'd spent years in motion. When the music slowed, she instinctively closed the distance between us. "You clearly spend time in the gym, Deb," I commented. After the dance, we walked hand in hand to the bar to grab a drink. I had the sense she might be staking a claim, though I didn't mind. If that was the case, she'd still have to get past Brady and Serena, the American version of the Spanish Inquisition. I led her back to our table and introduced her to them, pleased when my 2 closest friends offered her a brief grace period before launching their full interrogation. "I'll go get you another drink," I said with a grin and headed to the bar. There, James's mother Maren approached, smiling as she looked over at Deb, now seated with Brady and Serena. "She's a character," she said, "but I've heard the 3 of you are pretty protective of one another. Let's see how she handles the scrutiny. Give it a few minutes before heading back." So that's exactly what I did. As we waited, Maren filled me in a bit more. Deb was a year younger than me at 55. She'd been married for 15 years before catching her husband cheating about a decade ago. "Gave him a swift kick where it counts, and then kicked him out for good," Maren said, clearly amused. When I returned to the table 5 minutes later, the 3 women were laughing together, but for some reason, I didn't feel quite as relaxed as when I'd left. A few years later, our 2-year-old granddaughter Kara Lawson was a constant blur of motion, running through our spacious home alongside our 2 Labradors, her laughter echoing from room to room. Her parents sat at the kitchen table sipping iced tea, joined by 4 of her 6 grandparents. James and Emmeline, living just 45 minutes away, visited often to spend time with Kara. James's parents, Maren and Tom, admitted to feeling a bit envious of our frequent visits, so we invited them to spend Christmas week with us, making it possible for all 6 grandparents and Uncle Ryder to celebrate the holidays together. Maren eagerly accepted, especially excited to reunite with her best friend Deb, whom she hadn't seen since Deb and I got married and moved to Santa Fe. Tom, however, needed a little convincing. Privately, he shared some discomfort. He'd never spent much time around a lesbian couple before. "They're just like any other married couple, Tom," I reassured him. "I trust them completely, just like I do you and Maren." "Well, I'll admit they're both very attractive," he said sheepishly. "I guess I just imagined lesbians being different." I chuckled. "Yeah, they shatter a few stereotypes. Don't overthink it. They're just women. Honestly, they probably own more shoes than both of us combined." Deb was everything I hadn't known I needed in a wife: energetic, dynamic, and constantly in motion. While I tended to be more laid back, her liveliness was contagious. During her first spring living with us, I found myself preparing a garden at her request. We planted all sorts of salad greens, with Deb overseeing the process like a forewoman on a construction site. I teased her about being part cat. After all, cats are nature's best supervisors. Brady and Serena warmed up to her emotionally almost as quickly as I had, though that didn't stop them from issuing a stern warning before our wedding. They made it clear they would fiercely protect me if she ever hurt me. Deb admitted the next day that the warning had left her a bit rattled. "I'm pretty sure they weren't joking, babe," I told her seriously. "We've always looked out for each other." "I know they weren't," she replied. "I'd never hurt you, but if I ever did, I wouldn't stick around. I'd disappear. It's called self-preservation." Years later, Deb convinced Maren and Tom that Santa Fe would be the perfect place to retire, and 8 years after she moved in with me, they did just that. They even retired a bit early when the house next to ours came on the market. Tom got fully on board once he learned that Brady was a fellow Premier League enthusiast. Brady was an Arsenal supporter, while Tom was loyal to Crystal Palace. Whenever their teams faced off, the living room felt like an English pub on match day, complete with friendly but intense banter. Old man and eat old man were common jabs exchanged across the couch. We quickly learned that football fans, or soccer fans in the US, were far more passionate than baseball fans. In fact, when Arsenal played Crystal Palace, James and Emmeline intentionally left their 3 grandchildren at home. One warm summer evening in Santa Fe, I sat on the porch swing out back, sipping a glass of Jameson Black Barrel Irish whiskey and reflecting on just how lucky I'd been in life. My eldest grandchild came outside and nestled beside me, leaning her slender frame into mine. She had that same deep red hair and brilliant blue eyes that always reminded me of her late grandmother. "What's on your mind, Granado?" she asked, using her special nickname for me. "I was just thinking about my life and how lucky I've been," I replied. "How come?" she asked, genuinely curious. I took a slow sip of whiskey, trying to find the right words for a 9-year-old. "Well, you know how sometimes something bad happens, but it all turns out okay in the end?" She thought for a moment, her brow furrowed. Then her face brightened, like when I scraped my knee the other day and Grandma gave me ice cream. I chuckled and smiled at her. "Exactly." She grinned back, clearly satisfied that she'd understood. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comment section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles.
Dear listeners, before we get started, drop a quick hi in the comments and let us know where you're tuning in from. Also, if you have any suggestions for us to make the channel better, please let us know. Now let's start with the story. We steamed south to Lisbon, where we were informed that several schools of cabinet making were still in business. Emilia and I stayed on board while the rest of the crew rented a villa to kick back for a while. Occasionally, I caught her looking out at the city while holding herself. I could easily see that she didn't want to be alone in a strange place. I hired a security company to patrol our dock 24/7 for the duration of our stay. It seemed to make her feel more comfortable about being on board with just me around. I paid our woodworkers to come and give us an estimate both to create a showplace of our museum and to bring our ship's accommodations up a few notches in comfort as well as quality. It would never be opulent, but we certainly could improve matters. I had the carpeting replaced throughout the ship except for the kitchen, heads, and engineering spaces, where rubber mats went in where it made sense. The galley tables had their tops replaced by ingrain maple, much as how a butcher's block is built. I thought about wainscoting in the passages, but the risk of spreading a fire made me dubious of that idea. I cut a happy medium and scheduled fireproof sound-deadening ceiling tiles to be installed in all passageways and group crew spaces, such as the galleys and break room. I also had it done to the bridge. I approved the budget and let them loose. We needed a yearly recertification to keep our insurance rates low as to be welcomed in most ports. Our electronics underwent recalibration and certification. The engines would not need major work for quite a while. The oil sumps were tested for particulates and came up fine. Since we had 2 mess rooms, we ate out of the one that wasn't being worked on. Eventually, I grew tired of sitting around on my, but smelling all the adhesives curing under the carpet. I talked Amelia into drawing a security team and seeing the sights. The city was a huge tourist destination. It only figured that there was something to draw them, and we were going to find out what it was. Instead of wandering about blindly, I resolved to let my bank balance open some doors. I hired a tour guide, car and driver to shepherd us around. We did the castle tour thing, visited the various city neighborhoods, took in several museums, and ate some truly top-flight dinners. We didn't travel a quarter of the way around the world to stay at a bloody Marriott motel. There were very few times in my life that I could justify spending over $1,000 a night, but we did it. Amelia suggested that we spiff up our wardrobes. Who was I to complain? We spent enough money to feed a small Sicilian town for a year or two. I contracted with a top-of-the-line ship's chandler to have the china and flatware replaced on board the Jameson before we returned to the ship. The combined changes really made a difference. The crew's break room had new, comfortable furniture. The mess rooms had paneled walls and sported indirect lighting. The kitchen spaces gleamed, and the bridge looked like it belonged on a Princess Cruise Line ship. It had been paneled in maple, and the captain's chair was replaced by a pair of futuristic-looking gizmos that I was assured were comfortable as hell. The museum was fully paneled and had red velvet-lined display drawers for all the smaller items. It smelled wonderfully of lemon oil and the histories of the Persian carpets that covered the floor deck. The crew wouldn't recognize the place. After the refit, we needed to get the vessel inspected. That task was taken care of over about a week's time. We passed our certifications, including the fire inspection. Our zincs were fine, but we were dinged for being short on emergency supplies, so I laid in a couple pallets of international MREs, wool blankets, sheets, pillows, tarps, and stretchers that could be used as makeshift bunks. This pretty well filled up the ship's bow storage. I called the place in Vigo that had smoked the salmon for us and ordered another batch to be readied for pickup in a couple of weeks. That set the day we needed to leave. I scheduled the standard maintenance script to be completed the day before our target departure date. Now, I just had to get our thoroughly debauched crew back on deck and in some semblance of order. I placed a call to the phone that I'd insisted Jim carry and let them know about our upcoming departure date. I didn't get too much whining. When Wanda got back on board, I let her know that her budget had just grown and we'd appreciate some local specialties to give the voyage a bit of local flavor. She grabbed Carl and they headed out to do some damage. They came back with cases of spirits, sausages, fresh fruit, and vegetables. Carl was hugging a great big goddamn flat-bottomed pan with handles. My curious look netted me a one-word response: paella? Ah, I understood. Everyone seemed to appreciate the changes to the vessel. It was a hell of a lot quieter with the new carpeting and sound-deadening tiles in place. There wasn't much that could be done about the engineering spaces. Those engines threw off a fine mist of oil that covered everything, but a sealed hatch separated that area from the crew space. Fred and Sid knew enough to keep it under control. We steamed north to Vigo, where we loaded the on-deck walk-in with our fresh smoked jerked salmon. We really packed that sucker. For dinner, Carl served us a Pacific Rim dish much like fried rice. It had flakes of smoked salmon, shavings of vegetables, and a generous decoration of chopped green onions, all in a little ginger chicken broth. He'd benefited from the break. He was getting creative again. He called it kedgeree, and we called it good. We headed through the Straits and on to Valencia, where we picked up more cases of wine, as much as we could get of the local marmalade made from bitter oranges, cheeses, and meats. Carl surprised us. He said we were having steam table done right for dinner. We sure did. Chinese hot pot. The food slicer got a workout, and I think he had every burner in the place simmering away with some dipping sauce or another. I know I recognized pho from the cracked marrow bones. He color-coded the dipping sauce bowls for a relative heat index. Good idea. I sure as hell left the bright red one alone. It was messy but delicious. We voted that the next few nights were cook's nights off. We all pitched in to clean the place back to its original pristine condition. Jim did a little baking, and we all had fresh blueberry scones. When a kitchen smells clean, that's a pretty reliable indicator that it is clean, as long as overriding smells like pine sol or bleach aren't covering things up. I consulted with Wanda to see if we had a few things in stock like pork tenderloins, smoked sausage, or kielbasa, and frozen orange juice. I made dinner that night and the next, where we all pigged out on smoked sausage, sauerkraut, and boiled potatoes. It wasn't calorie-counting stuff, but nobody complained. I can run a slicer with the best of them. We had roast beef and cheddar sandwiches on Jim's fresh bread. With some things you just can't go wrong. A little reheated faux liquor for dipping, and you've got something. The third night, we settled on pasta with marinara sauce, something we hadn't had in a while. Somehow, everyone had agreed without agreeing to take the grand tour. Emilia and I laid out plots and distance estimates. We'd keep it conservative and try not to push our fuel envelope. Next stop, Barcelona. Now, Barcelona has a history almost as long as the Catholic Church. We ran around loose and picked up a few things like suckling pigs for the grill and some cedar planking to make a sauna. We were running out of spare cabins. I'd heard about a dry-cured Spanish ham serrano that was so well-cured that it had to be shaved thin to eat, like Westphalian ham in Germany. For an unreasonable cost, I procured a case of traditionally cured 2-year-old hams for the larder. Soon we left for Marseille, France's largest seaport. The port itself was pretty damned disgusting, with dumped holding tanks and diesel slime everywhere. We cut our visit short and motored on. Now, Cannes was a different kettle of fish. It was a rich man's tourist city with a sense of understated elegance, sort of whatever you want, we've got. It had obviously gentrified as the royalty of Europe left for less well-published locations. A new generation was taking over, and it was becoming more businesslike. Genoa was another old city, and it was a tourism magnet. Ever heard of Genoa salami? Uh-huh, that's the place. Carl ran through that place like grain through a goose, buying local specialty foodstuffs. I have to admit, though, he bought the good stuff. Lord, the cities came and went, fast and furious. We hit Viareggio, Naples, Cagliari in Sardinia, Messina, and Marsala on the island of Sicily. Once we got to Greece, I called a halt. We stayed in Heraklion, Crete for about a month. We weren't in a goddamned race. We worked on the sauna for most of a week, then gave it a try. We experienced no burned butts or backs from exposed screw heads and called it a success. The scent of the cedar was overwhelming at first. We were all turning into gourmands, eating well-prepared dishes made from top-flight ingredients. Carl had to reread the dietitian's chapters of his CIA workbooks and started weighing portions. It was push-ups and sit-ups for us, paying for our sins. To tell the truth, we ate a lot more salads. We were in a target-rich environment as far as destinations went. I suggested that we stay in Greece because we'd already gotten our passports stamped. Next stop, Thessalonica. After looking at the size of the city, I prayed that the next few places we hit would be small ports. After taking an English-language tour of the city, I came away with one major opinion: nice place to visit, but I wouldn't want to live there. Every sentence the tour guide spouted seemed to begin with "after the earthquake of this, that, or the other." Too much shaking going on. We discussed the political climate of the Eastern Mediterranean basin and collectively decided that our arms were too much of a good thing to some of the smaller countries, such as Cyprus or Lebanon. I voted to return to Spain to weather over the winter. We found place that we hadn't been yet, Cadiz. They accepted the euros, which we still had aplenty, and had international markets in which we could convert the rest of our gold ingots to Krugerrands. We steamed west, staying well north of the African coast since reports of piracy had multiplied over the past few years. We steamed into Puerto de Cadiz one bright winter morning in late November. After getting the ship serviced, I paid for 3 months' dock fees and services at a guarded wharf where various yachts were already tied up. Our beat-up-looking destroyer wannabe got a few odd looks and turned up noses, but we didn't care. We had firepower, and they had been farts. Our cash reserves were probably better than theirs as well. I wanted a guided tour, and the crew agreed. Even Amelia joined in. There were more wineries and distilleries than you could shake a stick at. I could tell that our bonded stores red, wine, and distilled liquor were going to get a shot in the arm at this port. I found out how to get on the mailing list for several local auction houses and had a ball. Amelia had an educated eye and accompanied me to the auctions, dressed to the nines. I, of course, was obliged to dress up so as not to put her to shame, being seen with such a ragamuffin as myself. We soon had the crew spaces equipped with some quite respectable paintings. We tried not to spend too much, relying on appeal and quality rather than the price tags. I bought a few small bronzes for my own appreciation. Amelia patted my shoulder and said, "Not bad for barbarian." I felt cut, truly cut. I may not have had a classical education, but I did watch Antiques Roadshow. We took the crew out for some nightlife. We hit a few of the bigger tapas bars around. We got some ideas about what was good and what wasn't. We didn't like oily fish on tapas, but roe was good. Beef, pork, lamb, poultry, eel, and nice, flaky fish won the day. Even cheeses and spicy white beans had their place if they complemented the wine. I could see Carl taking mental notes. I knew that tapas was on the menu sometime in our near future. Some of the local red wines were worth a second look, however we found that they would not keep, while many of them were new wines. Sloshing around aboard ship was not going to do them any good. I decided to do an evil thing. I managed to get reservations for Carl and myself for a place that I'd only heard of. They slow-cooked suckling pigs so tender that they cut it at the table with the edge of a plate. He tried a mouthful and tried to stare me down. He whispered, "You scum-sucker." I just sat back and smiled, knowing that I'd won that round. The flesh was meltingly sweet and soft while the skin delicately crackled between the teeth. We paid good money for a tour of the kitchen so he could get an idea of the process used to produce such a dish. Between this and spitted pit-roasted gaucho beef, which I had yet to introduce to him, I knew that one day he'd retire and open a restaurant to die for. We just had to get him a worthy wine list. There were many variants on tapas served throughout the surrounding 30 miles or so. It was quite a metroplex, and the two things they all seemed the proudest of were tapas and carnival, held just before Lent. From what I understood, it put Rio de Janeiro to shame. Well, we'd see. Soon it was Christmas. Let me tell you, Christmas in a predominantly old-school Catholic country is an exercise in devotion, celebration, and family. We had our own family, the crew, all 10 of us. We had a few guitar players, Wanda, Tina, and Janet. The ladies did quite well for themselves. Carl asked us all to write down our favorite holiday dishes and set about preparing the ones with the most votes. Baked turkey and mustard glazed ham fought it out for the main course, while the range of vegetables kept the ovens busy for quite a while as well. I don't know where he got cranberry relish, but there it was, along with onion sage stuffing. I know that pumpkins were available in Greece, so he must have had the forethought to procure a few for the pumpkin cheesecakes. Pineapple upside-down cake and cherry pie also graced our tables. I knew we'd be paying an exercise debt for a while after that feat. I helped as I could, but I was a rank amateur compared to him in a busy kitchen. It's amazing what youth, stamina, and training can accomplish in so small a space. I tried to imagine him cooking for the 200 that he professed to have done daily and stood back in awe. How do you learn to even manage the stores in a situation like that without destroying thousands of dollars in food? Simply amazing. He made the holiday. Afterwards, we aided in the cleanup and ate leftovers for over a week. Do you know what? A simple peanut butter and jelly sandwich tasted wonderful after all that gustatory indulgence. So did toasted cheese sandwiches and tomato soup. We had smothered pork chops and apple jelly, ketchup-glazed meat loaf, hot ham sandwiches with mashed potatoes and grilled hamburgers before he decided to take control of his kitchen again. I was glad I was out of ideas. Just after New Year's Day, we had a visitor. Vladimir Putin had looked us up. The man looked like a minimalist sculpture of himself. His skin was gray, he was flushed with a fever, and had lost too much weight. He needed a refuge, and we were it. Carrie took him into the sick bay and proceeded to damn near blood test him into shock. Carl took one look and started making a big pot of Grandma's penicillin chicken soup. We got him into the hot tub to relax and detox. Carrie whispered into my ear heavy metal poisoning. We ordered twice his vital capacity in blood and proceeded to do a complete blood replacement while I looked for, found, and bought a state-of-the-art dialysis machine. Once his tissues started refluxing the toxins back into his bloodstream, we'd need to get them out of circulation. We fed him, gave him steam sauna, and took hot tub with him to let him know that he wasn't alone. He started putting on weight and regained most of his sharpness of wit. Vladimir, you were poisoned. Can you accept that? He nodded. There is not much to argue against such a finding, is there? Nope. Now, how did it happen? What's changed in and around your life since we've seen each other? He thought long on this. Not much really. He shrugged. A new fleet of armored limousines took over for the old ones. He wrinkled his nose. They stink. I got a nasty idea. I'll bet that they do more than stink. I'll bet that you're being gassed as you were driven around. A little pellet on the exhaust manifold piped into the cabin air supply. What do you think? He looked at me for a while in a way that made me nervous. I think you have a nasty, evil mind, and the KGB deserves you. Carrie piped up. It makes a lot of sense. The heaviest depositions of the metals are within the lungs. He looked pained. No exercise for me, for a while. Damn. Suka, I need to shoot someone. I tried to calm him. There is a time for healing and a time for killing. Relax and find your targets first. Who had access? Who covered up the plan? Who authorized the plan? Who executed the plan? Make a list. Check it twice. See who's been naughty or nice, no? He gave me a goofy look then grinned. You make a joke in the worst of times. I make you Russian, you wait. I rolled my eyes. God forbid. American is bad enough. You'll make me Polsky before we're through, and we'll both say take it into the yard, and let the dog shit on it. I patted his shoulder and left him to stew in the hot tub. He had a lot of recovery ahead of him. We had him on a twice-daily dialysis regimen, but he seemed to be tolerating it. A traditional ethnic working-class Polish phrase translates to take it out in the yard and let the dog shit on it. It's very hillbilly and very old-school Polish. Sort of gives you a window into their mindset, doesn't it? Vladimir slowly compiled his lists. He used our internet connection quite a bit. He took the logic out and beat it until it squealed. He used the satellite telephone to contact 3 generals that he admired, respected, and trusted. I put my life into your hands. Some 2022 politicals and KGB have conspired to kill me. I am recovering yet am weak. Before they pull the trigger, they need to be distracted, isolated, and silenced. Call this number our sat phone number and ask for Dr. Carrie for proof she is caring for me. We actually got a couple of guests. It scared the hell out of us, not knowing if it was the bad guys coming to finish the job or the cavalry coming to save the day. We treated everyone with suspicion and live rounds until Vladimir vetted them. Some were doctors and said bad words while viewing the x-rays and diagnostic results. Vladimir was up to doing a few push-ups and sit-ups with us during morning PT. It seemed to be placing some more of the toxins back into suspension and using a dialysis regimen after PT. He seemed to be getting better every day. He still looked like shit. Areas of his skin had a tendency to discolor, blister, and peel, known arsenic poisoning symptoms. Chelation therapies were scary as hell. They were known for a risk of neural tissue damage. We continued with the slow but safe route. The day we heard of a Stalin-era type purge in central Russia, he looked old. I didn't know what to do. I shrugged my shoulders, packed him into a wheelchair, and headed for a children's playground. Just seeing this proud man accepting a ride in a wheelchair brought his condition into focus. Watching the kids seemed to perk him up. I calmly talked to him. We live for the children, the next ones. We cannot afford to waste too much on the now. He continued to watch. He sighed. What you say makes sense, but the short-sighted idiots have to be contained. He thought and fumed for a bit, then sighed again. We do what we can against the flood, yes? I answered that is all we can do. Yes. I never saw him in such a vulnerable condition again. He donned his armor and took the field like the general, no, the commander that he was. Soon he moved out of our care. Before he left, he said, "Come see me in Vladivostok. I shall surprise you." I could see his old grin somewhere in his face. He had changed, but he still had his spirit. Good for him. Lent was just around the corner, and Carnival was on. I was assured that there wasn't an unrented room to be had within 30 miles. Families were making extra money by taking paying travelers into their guest rooms. The crowds and parades were amazing. Parties? There were block parties, winery parties, beach parties, processions, fireworks every night, and generalized debauchery ruled. I saw police officers with eyeshadow, rouged cheeks, and lipstick. The whole place went noisily nuts. I was sure that at the furious rate they were celebrating the coming of Lent was a blessing to keep the entire city from burning out in a bacchanalic seizure. With the coming of Lent, we quietly replenished our stores and left town amidst the comparative calm of the day. We were heading on a long journey, this time south, to Cape Town, South Africa. This voyage would no doubt test us as a crew. We would be steaming over 7,000 miles at 14.5 knots, deep water sailing for most of it. I spent most of my time with Amelia, either spelling her at the helm, acting as the radar operator, or checking our coordinates at the plotting table. We read and played a lot of cards, too. Sure, I spent some time helping wipe down the mechanical space and helping to clean the ship to give me a chance to talk to the rest of the crew, taking their temperature, so to speak. From all I'd read in Amelia's books, I operated as an unlicensed second mate and purser. We'd be roughly half a month at sea if the weather held. I held out little hope of perfect weather, with it being mid-March. We had a minor celebration as the equator slipped behind us. We were in African coastal waters, and the weather held. I remembered something about the equatorial doldrums of the sailing age, but it didn't quite come to me. Soon we would be heading out into the deep blue waters, making directly for South Africa. We were mentally prepared for high seas, but we really were not. Too many things were not fastened down. Pictures came down off the walls and had to be stowed until we could reach port to obtain proper fasteners. We lost a few dishes, which was to be expected, and sick bay had a couple of storage cabinets crash to the floor. Some of the crew were unprepared for the way our ship reacted to 24 to 26-foot waves. Our cook had previously worked on a cruise ship, which took such weather with hardly a quiver. The pitch and roll of the galley had him catching a mixer more than once. The slicer was bolted down, thank God. I didn't even want to think about the ramifications of him trying to catch a running meat slicer. We weren't equipped for microsurgery. The rule became no fried foods during heavy seas. An open-top fryer filled with 350-degree oil was just too damn dangerous. As we approached the Cape, the weather cooled off. Cold rains came in heavy bursts. It kept the decks clean, but sure precluded any use of the hot tub. The lowering clouds and heavy spray made us rely more on the radar than our eyes for navigation and any collision avoidance, much as on night watch or in foggy conditions. Early morning, day 26 brought Cape Town Harbor into view. We were running on fumes. The weather had consumed almost all of our margin. We radioed the portmaster, and a tug was dispatched to meet us. We were assigned a slip, then paid rental and bunkerage fees. The silence was eerie after we cut power to the engines. The weather was quite pleasant, being in the mid-70s during the day. We decided to cut loose and run wild for a while. After hiring port security to keep anyone from steaming off with our ship or any parts thereof, we hired a minibus taxi to take us to the third best hotel in town, where we took the top floor as ours for a minimum of a month. Instead of having us sweat and slave over cleaning the Jameson, we were going to get a professional maritime cleaning team in to do it for us. The portmaster helped me get in contact with a reliable firm. Doc warned us about TB and AIDS being alive and well in the city. I gently reminded them to go in teams of 3 wherever they went. We hired a tour bus and driver to give us a 3-day tour of the city. It was still early enough in the fall that the botanical gardens were a good place to stop for a while. The beaches were nearly empty, but that didn't stop us during the afternoons. The city was a snacker's dream. There were little eclectic restaurants everywhere. We had Vietnamese, Malay, Moroccan, Chinese, and local ethnic places to pick from. Thank God that they were big believers in barbecue. I'd missed barbecued goat since leaving my Chilean days. We found a place that did Argentine asado, vertical spit roasted beef done in a sand pit within the restaurant. Brick walls around the pit kept the place from burning down, but there was a layer of wood smoke throughout the place about 4 feet off the ground. It was served with beans and chimichurri sauce, kind of chuck wagon style. Can you tell that we had evolved into foodie tourists? We spent a couple of hours each morning in the hotel gym. While sweating away, I asked the crew if they wanted to sacrifice one galley for an exercise room with a few workout machines in there. The general consensus was go for it. One of the galleys was right off the kitchen, the other across the passageway, and down a bit, making hauling food and dishes back and forth more difficult. That was our candidate. Free weights were a big no-no on a ship. Instead, we bought a Bowflex, takes up less space than a Nautilus, a rowing machine, an elliptical trainer, and a treadmill. A few rubber mats and a CD player finished the place off for less than $8,000. We had the movers take the equipment below decks and install it. I used the crane to get them to mid-deck, which made things one hell of a lot easier. Carrie and Tina collared a rep for a narcotic company and got a CD with a physician's desk reference addendum showcasing his company's products. This was stuff that wasn't available in the US because of licensing issues. They bought blood expanders, fast-acting wound dressings that would stop arterial bleeding cold, previously only available to the military, some chelating agents designed to be used with dialysis machines, a next-generation arthroscopic surgery system, and a small microsurgery system capable of repairing a torn retina or reattaching a severed finger with an acceptable to good prognosis. How she shoehorned all that shit into the old ship's workroom simply amazed me. Engineering still had their workroom and storage, so no serious crabbing over space occurred. We were in the second week of April. We found ourselves bored. It was a beautiful, complex city, but it was winding down for winter. I shrugged my shoulders and yelled, "Next destination?" Nobody had been to India. We went to India. I did some reading and came up with Paradip, just a shout south of Baleshwar, which boasted a notable temple complex. We went touring to see how this continent differed from what we'd seen before. Their polytheistic culture ripped the sculptural and architectural barriers wide open, with worshippers attempting to outdo each other down through the centuries. We didn't stay long. I personally wanted to visit Thailand to see how the Buddhist traditional Wats compared to the temples of India. We stopped in Bang Lamong. I'd made a mistake. It was essentially a rail stop. We steamed on to Lame Sing, where the temperature in the upper 80s, lower 90s lured us to the beach. We were informed that if we saw any Buddhist priests, it was proper to offer them food, but never money unless it was covered, as they had taken vows to never touch money. Okay, envelopes were cheap, and I had a few Krugerrands in my pocket. I was going to blow some minds. 3 old men in red gold robes waited patiently for offerings where the road broke into parking spots for people to get to the beach. I placed a coin wrapped in paper and tied with a piece of green yarn in each of their bowls, then sighed to them and walked away. I could hear their excited talking from halfway down the beach. I love being a scumsucker sometimes. As I returned to the group sunning on beach towels, Emilia asked, "I know you just did something. You're smiling. What happened?" Well, I told her. Emilia, Janet, Carrie, Tina, and Wanda each gave me a hug. The guys just smiled. After a while, a younger monk stopped where we were sitting. He gave me the hairy eye. "You cannot buy karma with gold, you know." I patiently replied, "I realize that. I have killed, I have loved, I have brought others into their centers. Sometimes I simply wish to raise hell by doing good. Is there anything wrong with that?" He looked at me for the longest time. "Are you Buddhist?" I nodded. Think of me as a Buddhist warrior. I don't identify with any one temple, but I try to keep the proper attitude. Balance is good. He nodded very fast. Balance is good. Balance is very good. He sighed quickly yet deeply and walked away. Emilia just had to come back with "Thus the fool confounds the wise man." Damn, she got me again. I couldn't catch a break with that woman. I caught shit from the rest of the crew for weeks after that. A guy can't win sometimes. A little smiling thing inside me understood and didn't fight. I deeply wished to revisit Thailand. The culture was so integrated with Buddhism that the feeling of being there brought an involuntary smile to my face. The country felt right to me. I was rowing my way across the English Channel courtesy of the exercise room when Emilia entered, leaned against the wall, and watched me sweat for a while. "Where are we going next?" I stopped, panting, and covered my knees with my elbows, resting. "How about Nha Trang in Vietnam? It's on our way, and we hit another culture." She considered it for a while, then nodded. "Okay, this one will be interesting." She sauntered out. She wasn't kidding. I was expecting an exploited Vietnam War-era wreck, but the blue waters, pristine beach, and thriving business district showed this city to be a dynamo. There were some Buddhist influences that I noted, but the whole place screamed vacation paradise. What a shock. There were no bar girls, no hookers, nothing to give a tourist family pause. It was as if the place had been Disneyland without the advertising. A new word: think of a war zone. A big pink bomb goes off, and Mickey Mouse appears waving his magic wand, wearing his sorcerer's hat, turning everything into a place the mouse built. Gah. Spit tui. We still stayed a couple weeks touring the old temples and touring. Late April was upon us. Okay, let's talk food. Let's talk lobster. These guys didn't know what a lobster po' boy was. Well, I think we started something. City Vietnamese are street food people. There were little hot carts and stalls everywhere. These people didn't stand still once they saw something that would make money. By the time we left, there were street carts serving up lobster po' boys fit to beat the band. God love him. Next stop, China. I did not want to visit Shanghai. I did not want to experience several million people trying to outcompete one another while stacked like cordwood. We hit up the coast a bit Shanghai. We had our tanks pumped and the fuel bunkers filled. I inquired about a company that I'd seen on the internet. They specialized in 2-cycle high-efficiency desalination units. With a water plant, we could reclaim some good cubic and increase our range. A small water tank, say, 200 gallons fixed to the top deck. A couple of pumps and a 20 cubic foot water plant would replace 2 tanks, taking up the space of a full-sized shipping container. Granted, it would increase our fuel utilization by a fraction, but I thought it was worth it. I purchased a 300 gallon per day unit and 3 sets of filters. I had another 12 sets of filters shipped to our warehouse in Florida. We had a door cut into the wall of the old tank, a watertight hatch installed, and removed the old fill snorkel, corking it with a threaded cap. The inside's got an epoxy paint job. A duckboard deck went in because of the sloping sides of the tank led to the drain. By calculation, including the waste space below my feet, we'd recovered 71.8 cubic meters. Now, a 40-foot marine container holds 68.7 cubic meters. Yup, we got a full-size shipping container's worth of space back below decks, where it was the most valuable. I wanted to hit the yearly sword auctions in northern Japan Noshiro. We steamed into the harbor, got our passports stamped, and I stormed the beaches like the Allies stormed Normandy, searching out the auctions, hoping that I wasn't too late. I managed to land some of the most beautiful examples of hand-forged steel swords that I'd ever seen. I managed to get my hands on an antique, not cut-down horseman's katana with a bull nose. A major Japanese news service sent out a reporter-photographer team to find out about this ganjin that spent a lifetime's worth of money on traditional Japanese swords. I welcomed them onto the Jameson and handed them into the mess where we had tea and biscuits cookies. I described my Buddhist leanings and love of art. Then came the denouement. I led them into the museum where the newly acquired blades were displayed. I let them wander through the exhibits, touching, lifting, caressing. Cotton gloves were available for handling some objects such as the blades. I hope to think that they came away with a new understanding of how to appreciate beautiful things. With trepidation, we sailed for Vladivostok for a meeting with the leader of all the Russias. We had done him a life-giving favor and were anxious as to what he planned for us. He said that he was going to make me Russian. That was ominous. I didn't sleep well during that voyage. Emilia called me a fool. I replied that I was an educated paranoid. I had proof that someone was out to get me. Our steaming into the harbor at Vladivostok was pretty low-key. We were directed to berth next to a big-assed blue-painted ship that was obviously built for the Soviet Navy. Glenmorey was painted on either side of her prow. I had a bad feeling about this. It took Vladimir a couple of days to break free and schedule a flight to see us. The first thing the scumsucker did was to present each of us with black-covered Russian passports, diplomatic passports. I was now a Russian citizen. When he handed it to me, I said Nazdrovia. I watched him turn red as he tried to stifle the laughter. Next, I was presented with the charter and ownership papers for a Udaloy-class destroyer, the Admiral Panteleyev, renamed the Glenmorey. Oh shit. Oh hell. Oh damn. Oh hell. Now what the hell do I do? Screw. Vladimir, I can't read Russian, nor do my crew. And how many does that thing crew? 100? 200? This is ridiculous. Calm down, calm down. You are hereby commissioned by the Soviet government to act as diplomatic agents of good will to the world. Everything aboard has been renamed into your vile English. I have 50 crewmen for you that speak English, know how to party, and know the ship inside and out. The big guns have been removed, but 4 30mm electric cannon much like your GE chain guns are installed, and I have been informed that the fire control system has been updated to use them to their fullest. He leaned over and whispered to me, "They're mean sons of bitches. I had them leave in the fire control software and mounts for the missiles if you need to step it up." The vessel was built for anti-submarine warfare, and anti-aircraft capability was grafted on later. Try not to start any wars, my friend. They'd already opened up the cabins to make them more comfortable to the crew. I shook my head. Vladimir, I am touched at the lengths to which you have gone to repay us. However, we couldn't afford to run her. I thought for a while. What would you say to installing a truly large desalinization plant on her, stock her with emergency supplies, and have her head out whenever disasters strike, such as hurricanes, earthquakes, or tsunamis? If she flew under your flag, repurposed to render aid after natural disasters, it would benefit your country's reputation much better than having my bunch of madmen running loose under your flag. You can show how innovative you are as well. There have been some things published about using industrial insulating board with high-strength fiberglass tape to make emergency housing that should last for years. She looks as if she could hold a lot of stores. We walked as I talked, over to a dockside bench. We sat and argued. I wasn't lying much. A vessel of that size would have a maintenance schedule that would drive us nuts. The engines were gas-powered rather than diesel, which increased the risk of fire quite a bit. She had long legs and was fast, which no doubt put extra stress on the engines compared to our old reliable diesel pushers. Again, high maintenance. Our older ship was slow, but it was dependable. Its icebreaker certification meant that it had a thick hull with lots of bracing. We had a good thing. I talked, he talked, and I ended up by handing back the ship's papers. He did offer to dry dock us, sandblast the hull, replace the zincs, and coat her top to bottom with a good anti-fouling paint. I was no fool, I accepted. We were going to stay in the city for the 2 weeks that the job would take. Yes, that was fast, but the military shipyard was commanded to do it, and that was that. Vladimir was shown the new changes, including the museum. Being a swordsman, he appreciated the weapons I'd bought in Japan. After he shook hands with all of us, he left to get back to his schedule. The harbor master was interested in what the big deal was with giving us a good, fast job. He got a tour of the ship, focusing on the electronics and the mechanical spaces. He patted one of our big diesels and said something about last forever. We looked at each other and grinned. The workmen needed to get busy to meet the schedule, so we cut the tour short, packed our bags, and left the ship in the harbor master's capable hands. We were taken to the Hotel Hyundai and took several suites on the top floors. They had English-speaking staff and a reputedly pretty good Korean restaurant on one of the first floors. There was a bar with live music on the top floor. It was a business hotel, what can I say? The guy at the front desk found us an English-speaking tour guide that showed us around for a couple of days. After that, we were on our own. The hotel was within sight of the harbor, so we walked down to see what the progress was on the Jameson. They had the steering gear torn down and the prop off. Men in bosun's chairs were sandblasting the hull clear. They were obviously pros, taking the paint down to the metal quickly and efficiently. We weren't going anywhere for a while, so we went back to touring. Pizza seemed to be the local specialty. We consumed pizza and ran up and down the streets like a squad performing PT during the early morning hours. One morning, a sailor from the Glemery saw us doing our run. He stopped us and asked, "Why are you running?" I answered, "To get rid of all the pizza." He laughed. Good idea. The next morning, there were 60 of us pounding the pavement. Some were in not so good a shape, but most had the breath to laugh and joke as we ran. I wasn't one of them. It seemed as if we had the entire fleet pounding down the street in time. I'm certain that we made some enemies before we left. Some of the captains from the ships in harbor heard about our little exercise party and thought that it was a pretty good idea. Soon squads from most of the ships were pounding the concrete in the pre-dawn hours. After a little time on the internet, we pounded in one morning and greeted the desk clerk with Joan H.M. Good morning in Korean. I think we flabbergasted the man. The restaurant was willing to make us congee, or in Korean, juk with beef stock and onions for breakfast. We spooned a little cooked vegetables into the mix, and it hit the spot to set us up for the day's adventures. Cook rice overnight, slowly turning it into a gruel. Add spices, broth, and green onions. It's like Asian oatmeal. We ran around in a bunch, visiting museums and cultural spots. You can only visit so many museums and cultural spots without wanting to burn one or two to the ground. We got damn tired of Vladivostok, let me tell you. Soon our ship was out of dry dock and had gone through trials to make sure all the nuts were nut and bolts were bolted. We tanked up on diesel and headed out to sea. Where do we go next? The consensus was somewhere with a goddamn beach and English-speaking people. I languidly said they kind of speak English and they're good people. Let's hit Australia. Yay. It was May Day. We were headed for the land of the Barbie and Bondi Beach. We didn't run into any storms, but the 14 to 18-foot waves let us know that we were blue water sailors. Offshore of Mindanao in the Philippines, we were overtaken by 12 coastal patrol boats out to make a little spare cash. They demanded that we heave to and prepare to be boarded. We blew them out of the water and kept sailing. We sailed almost due south with a few jigs and jags to avoid the islands. Once we sighted Australia proper, we kept sailing west and south until we sighted a sand beach. From there we found a harbor. I radioed the Fremantle Harbor Authority. They suggested that we put in at Fishing Boat Harbor, just a bit further south. We ended up at the commercial docks, just inside the mouth of the river. We'd traveled about 4,700 nautical miles. After breaking in our brand new Russian diplomatic passports, signed by Vladimir Putin himself, we found that we could purchase bunkerage, but there were no secured docks. I shrugged, went ashore, and asked the harbor master for the loan of a telephone book. He didn't have any opinion over which security company was better than any other, so I split the difference in the phone listings and gave Nelson Security a call. Sorry, they did store and home security. They suggested that I give Joshua and Joshua a call. Hey, nothing like advice from a disinterested expert. We contracted with the Port Authority to hold our spot for 2 months, and with the security service to guard the ship for the same duration. Amelia procured good maps of the area and our own phone book. Perth is not a little bitty built-up area. It sprawls out like Miami, Florida. We sat there fat and happy wondering what to do next. After Vladivostok, we were definitely into sand and sea, beer and barbecue. Being in the southern hemisphere, in the middle of May, winter was beginning to set in. It was still nice enough to sit on the beach with windscreens. We cleaned out and warmed up the hot tub, too. We hired a stretch van and driver to shepherd us around. I paid him weekly so that he wouldn't take the cash then cut and run. Massive construction was everywhere and none of us had international driver's licenses. There were several ships Chandlers operating out of Perth. Wanda got with Carl for a wish list and started shopping around for choice and quality. We stocked up on locally grown lamb, pork, and beef. We bought our seafood still jumping from the fish market, but you had to get there at 3:30 in the morning for the best of the catch. We played merry hell buying charcoal for the barbecue grill. Tina took her job as pharmacist seriously. She inspected her inventory for expiration dates and replaced anything that looked remotely suspicious. All the Ringer's lactate, buffered ISO water, and packs of frozen blood platelets got dumped and replaced. We had some specialized burn dressings with amazingly short shelf lives that got replaced. How do I know all this? When I started hyperventilating after seeing the bill, she told me why it cost so much. Eventually I calmed down, but Jesus. We traded some of our smoked salmon to a high-end restaurant for some excellent dry-aged beef. Carl asked for and got a restaurant quality Hobart stainless steel bandsaw to break down quarters of beef, cut apart crab legs, and split marrow bones. We bought an itty-bitty steam cleaner to get all the nasty bits out of it after use. Otherwise it would have been toothbrush work. We couldn't find a single goddamn tapas bar in all of Perth. Carl, the dirty scumsucker, set about changing that. There were 3 competitive restaurants near where we were berthed called Cicerello's, the View Restaurant Fremantle, and the Char Char Bowl. He invited the owners and head chefs over to the ship for a tapas party. We ate in the cruise lounge while the owners and chefs schmoozed in the galley, trying different combinations. Carl said that he gave it 8 months, tourist season, when tapas would take over the seafront. I didn't doubt him. Carl's taste was damned near impeccable. We had to restock our cellar's Beaujolais bins after that. He stacked the deck. You see, a Beaujolais is a soft, less tannic wine that lets the flavors of the food come through. It was a time of indolent days and easy nights. We drank at brew pubs, ate well, and tanned at the beaches. I got more than a few dirty looks from nearby cargo ships when I lifted the barbecue lid to turn dinner. Envy is a horrible thing, isn't it? We cooked Texas brisket, Carolina barbecued pulled pork, Kansas City sweet ribs, and Mexican smoked and basted barbecued goat. I like to have died of protein poisoning, but what a way to go. We ate leftover shredded meat on toasted buns for days and days. We brought out the hash and had our first orgy in the hot tub. The next morning there were a lot of odd glances at each other until I let out a rebel yell. We partied. We screwed. We had a good time. Get over it. We weren't a crew. We were a team. The lesson I'd been trying to teach finally sank in. Yes, we could take a stinky shit in front of each other. Big deal. We had each other's backs. When we went out on the town, and one of the ladies got corralled by some big rugby, playing scumsucker, we quietly surrounded him and took him down. No problems, mate. Ooh, that's gonna heal funny. Better see a doc, eh? We were all doing Tai Chi in the mornings to stretch, then took on our run. We were well integrated. The only bad part about all this was the difficulty any newcomer might face integrating into our team. Also, if any one of us took a bullet, the rest would apply maximum tactical force to reduce said target. There would not be much rational thought between the hit and the response. I worried about that. There was no easy mechanism to back out of our mindset. All we could do is age and defocus as other players came on board. Granted, certain key phrases and call signs would reactivate the team. However, I believe that a long-term stand-down was our best method to desensitize the crew. As crewmen normally aged out and crewmen were brought on, we should see some of this if we lasted that long. The vessel had a definite lifespan. A representative of the government paid us a visit. I was cross-legged before one of the Vulcans applying dry lube to the mechanism. It is my understanding that you have military-grade weapons on board. I thought that it was a pretty stupid thing to say as I was in full maintenance mode on a Vulcan right before his eyes. Sure do. Got a problem with it? Military-grade arms are an interdicted cargo everywhere within Australian waters. I'm going to have you to surrender your arms or debark immediately. I reached into my back pocket, retrieved my Soviet diplomatic passport, and flopped it open in front of him, then continued working on the Vulcan. Argue with that. We're diplomats operating under extraordinary circumstances. We destroy pirates and transport critical goods, not to mention politically sensitive personnel and cargo. Please don't dictate to me out of a manual. Pass this up the ladder. You won't get in trouble and you won't be disappointed unless you pursue this. Junior had more brains than the quality of his suit suggested. Granted, we got a few government tourists breezing through to look us over, but other than that one-star general that cast a greedy eye on our firing platforms, everything came out all right. I took my tests to complete my papers as a second mate. I passed with pretty good scores by the rankings. I was a provisional first mate with fully accredited papers as a second mate. I was damned proud of myself, and Emilia couldn't put me down for once. Damn it. I got a big fat gold earring in my left lobe in celebration. It was a tradition that hadn't been in force for over a century, but I did it anyway. Historically, a sailor that crossed the equator was invested with the right to the earring. I wasn't a Marine, but I was a mariner. After 2 months, we agreed to move on to another port of call. In a city complex of that size, there was always something new to see, but it was getting repetitive. We hoisted anchor and headed out. It was mid-July. Melbourne Harbor looked like a mess, so we docked at Swan Bay. We used the cutter to get around, from across the bay to Mornington and Frankston to Hobson's Bay off of Williamstown North. By now we'd learned our way around a big port complex and Citiplex. Melbourne's high-end restaurants were overpriced and pretentious. One look at each menu drove me away. I asked a taxi driver where we could get good grub, and he was glad to take us there. The road truck drivers ate there, the taxi cab drivers ate there, and the cops ate there. Now, it wasn't flash, but it was Mom's cooking. I swear that it was one of those before I die meals. I didn't know that sea base could taste that good. We were waylaid, vamped, and turned to the dark side. God, but those guys could cook. I had prawns, trout, and catfish at my beck and call. I had learned many years before from a restaurant in Makakata, Iowa, how to fry a proper catfish and taught Carl the trick that week. When the tail crunches between your teeth, you've got something worth eating. Speaking of Carl, he was a great guy and a great cook, but he'd never been exposed to the training explicit to a seagoing galley. After asking about it at our preferred ship's Chandler out of Perth, we learned what the eyes were for sunk into the ceilings above the burners. We bought the chains and hooks to implement the safety system, as well as buying a few bloody huge pressure cookers, not so much as to speed up the cooking process, but more to contain the hot contents within. The mixer got tabletop mounts so that they wouldn't walk off the side of the counter. I also bought the kitchen a 30-quart Hobart professional floor-mounted mixer. That puppy got chained to the wall so it wouldn't go Frankenstein on us and chase someone down. I was told by a fellow in a bar that we'd missed a bet. Adelaide was a much more friendly city, and a food nut could die happy never leaving the Central Market. It being July coming into August, the dead of winter, a big covered market filled the bill admirably. We steamed off west, backtracking something like 1,000 miles. The Port Authority didn't want one of their valuable commercial slips tied up for a long period of time, so after bunkerage we rented a slip at the far south end of the Gulfport Marina, near the Coast Guard station. We tied up, hired guards as before, and hired a tricked-out short bus and driver to squire us about in style. We hit a mall to replace casual clothing, underwear, runners, bedding, and towels. I was informed in no uncertain terms that ladies' undergarments had specific lifespans before things became uncomfortable. Note: never piss off your female doctor. She gets PMS. She's in charge of the shot records and has lots of different sized needles. From there we drifted about wherever our driver thought there was a place we should see or eat or drink. He was a much better tour guide than some of the other professionals than we'd had. After a week and a half of roaming around, we paid the guy off with a nice tip after he left us at the Hilton Adelaide, just across the street from the Central Market and Arcade, all at the east end of Chinatown. We took a group of suites, converted some cash to AUD and strolled over to the market to get a high-level overview of the whole place. I found an optometrist shop and wanted to get my eyes checked. Amelia and I began strolling to it hand in hand. A younger man came up to us and asked for spare change. I said that we'd just gotten our funds converted and didn't have any small bills with us. A knife came out. "That's all right, I'll take those instead." I said I think not. He took a swing at me with the knife about belly height, more to intimidate than to harm, I believe. I captured his knife hand and popped him under the chin with the heel of my other hand, then hit him in the throat with the haft of his knife. He went down choking, and there were suddenly police everywhere. I noticed Amelia had one hand in her purse. Two fellows approached us with handcuffs. I held out one hand. Towards them. Diplomatic passports. I showed mine, and Amelia showed hers. "Where's the camera? Did it catch the scene?" I got nods. "Let's go see it." They started making excuses, and I shook my head. This will look very bad for this city when Vladimir and the U.S. State Department hear of it. That was as pretty a sting operation as I've seen. Now, unless you want either a diplomatic incident or two, or this complex blown to hell by a whole lot of innocent-looking lunchboxes and cases, I suggest that you clean up your act. I looked about the group and got a lot of big eyes and slack mouths. We will be reporting this event by diplomatic courier. As we walked away, I took a deep breath and released it. Amelia looked at me with one eyebrow up. I whispered to her, "You packin'?" "You damn betcha." Damn near blew his punk spine out his back. I nodded. Appropriate response. We probably would have gotten away with it. She snickered. I got my eyes checked and a new pair of specs, as well as a spare pair. You never know what will happen 500 miles away from land. That started me down a whole new paranoid chain of thought. We should check our ship APERB as well as get digital PLBs and survival suits for all of us. The South China Sea was known for killer weather during the spring and fall. That was just north of us. We were not trained in rope work, and 35 to 45-foot seas could easily wash a crewman overboard. I was sure that our ship's chandler could point us in the right direction. I had a tailor get the measurements of all crew members, including myself. I returned to the ship and used the dock's internet connection to look for auctions while I waited to receive the survival suits. While I waited, I phoned our State Department contact to file a grievance against the Adelaide Police Department particularly, and Australia in general. Within 4 days, a pallet bearing what looked like 12 smallish coffins arrived. I opened mine and was confronted with a garish orange thing that looked like someone's ghastly idea of a Halloween costume gone wrong. Yep, it was a grade A top-of-the-line survival suit guaranteed to keep a person afloat and breathing, in temperatures of bathwater down to 20 degrees where even seawater decides to solidify for days at a time. The PLBs were already installed in chest pockets. I tried mine on. There were a few tricks that I knew I'd missed as it took me over 15 minutes to don the damned thing. I tried again and again. Finally, I resorted to a generous dusting of foot powder. That did the trick. I slipped into that thing like grease shit. I nodded to myself. Now to get the others trained to keep in mind where their suit was at all times. We get there. I returned to the hotel, informing Amelia of what I'd been doing. Nice. Very good. That's what a proper first officer should be doing. I felt like a kid with his first lollipop. I took apart the list of auctions and found a couple of small sculpture, paintings, things of that nature. Yes, Amelia was interested in joining me. No one else seemed to have enough confidence in themselves to invest in artwork, so off we went in a rented limo. The first auction was basically estate jewelry. There were a few truly fantastic pieces that were quickly bid to the stratosphere. I found a few nice Baltic amber pieces which I bid on, as it's a particular fetish of mine. I prefer amber sheets or panels that can be backlit, but I take what I can get. I'm not big on inclusions, just color. A few good separates came up, such as rubies and emeralds which we bid on. The older opals were a disappointment, as they fade and desiccate over time. They are our most ephemeral of jewels. Amelia didn't see anything but one heavy gold Byzantine necklace that should have been in an antiquity museum. She paid a lot for it, but in my opinion still made one hell of a deal. We exhibited it on a model of Nefertiti's head and neck, much as Chicago's Field Museum did for their exhibit of ancient Egyptian jewelry. Next came an auction of various Flemish and early Renaissance painters. We picked up a few since the crowd didn't know the names of the painters. We did. Damn, that reminded me to obtain shake-proof picture mounts. I reminded myself to hang the investment quality ones up above where a shoulder banging from side to side of the corridor in high seas wouldn't take out a masterpiece. The very best were going to be hung in the museum. I went through a dealer to purchase a couple of pieces of 8 doubloons, every high-value coin that I could find from the golden age of sale. I intended to exhibit them under magnification and illumination, displaying the obverse and reverse of each example, illustrating what made the shipping and whaling industries possible. The early gold sovereign and the guinea, from when the guinea was a pound, were beautiful pieces of numismatic work. I had a few drawers in the museum re-engineered to exhibit this coinage. I found it amazing that with so much intercultural penetration going on, there was so much resistance to Indians, not natives, who were treated as second-class citizens, but immigrants from India who were positively despised by some factions. I couldn't understand it, yet quietly accepted it, as it was an unsolvable problem. It was a good thing a culturally inspired mugging didn't occur near me, though. After the holdup, I started to carry a hop hornbeam cane and knew how to use it. I know, big words from a 65-year-old man, but it's the first strike that counts, if you can make it count. I noticed a general lack of books on board. I took the whole tribe to a big bookstore and let them run wild on the ship's account. It didn't surprise me that a lot of Japanese manga got purchased. After all, naval personnel get exposed to a lot of different cultures and DVDs are easy to trade. I'm kind of fond of the Ghost in the Machine myself. I made sure our cook got a copy of McGee's on food and cooking. It's a historical and chemical treatment of foods, cooking, and the reactions that the chemicals in food undergo. It's a reference book for serious cooks. It's acutely a fun read. If you're a bit OCD, obsessive-compulsive, it was the middle of August. The seasons were about to turn. We didn't want to hit the high seas as the storms were coming. Instead, we traveled west and north to another big Australian city, Sydney. Our best bet for an available dock seemed to be Woomera Bay. Our being 180 feet 55 meters long had something to do with the availability of docks. We tied up at Cooper Wharf between the military vessels that quite frankly dwarfed us, paid our traditionally usurious wharf rental, took care of bunkerage, empty and pressure washed the Blackwater and Greywater tanks, and fill all the diesel tanks, and paid for a security team to watch our vessel. I pointed at one of the battleships and nudged Amelia. Just think, you could have been piloting something that size again. No chance. Ships that size are one hell of a lot of work to maintain. They have crews in the hundreds for a reason. I never said anything at the time, but I was damned glad that you turned that crazy Russian down. Having him turn her into an international aid vessel was stroke of genius. You pointed out one of the critical factors in any post-disaster scene: how to get clean, uncontaminated water to the people. Do you know that desalination ships are made purpose-built the size of a container ship? They serve an important niche around the world. Wow. Talk about coming out smelling like roses. I polled the crew as to how they wanted to proceed. Wanda piped up with, let's rent a big house. It's bound to be cheaper than the hotels, and for the right money, we might be able to get something off a beach. Let's stay for a few months and explore. This is supposed to be a party town. That's how we got an 8-bedroom mini-mansion with a swimming pool rented to us for 6 months. We hired a maid, a cook, a minibus and driver, as well as a small security team to watch the place and shadow us when we screwed around outside the fence. We became a familiar sight pounding up and down the streets at Odark 30. It was cool then, about 50 degrees F, which made exercising comfortable. We carried hoodies, towels, and water for when we stopped. It startled the hell out of us to come across another ship's company doing the same thing one morning. Our captains saluted each other, and we carried on. That was a blast. Soon we lengthened our runs, going as far as our ship's berth where we stopped, touched the hull, formed up, and ran back. After this we were free for the day. Mostly we ganged up on our driver to give us the skinny on what was hot around the city. Some days we beat the pool to a froth swimming laps until we liked to died, then did it again. I was in pretty damn good shape for 65. Amelia was pretty nice stuff, herself. Every so often we'd exercise the bed springs and have breakfast together. We had a comfortable relationship going, as I was sure others in the crew did as well. I was amazed that we had not one Krabbis among them. I counted that as a major miracle. I got some questions about the new suits in their quarters. I called a ship's meeting and described the survival suits, what they were for, what they could and could not do, as well as what they were worth. I got a few whistles out of that. They weren't cheap, let me leave it at that. I called an on-deck exercise the next day to demonstrate donning the suit, and we had a circus learning how to do it. I passed out bottles of Dr. Scholl's foot powder and told them what I'd learned. They quickly learned from my experience. I noticed a flash of light from the wheelhouse of a destroyer docked behind us. Someone was watching with binoculars. Good for them, the experience might teach them something worthwhile. I saluted in their direction. The next morning after exercises I received a caller. Hi, I'm Jim Janeway, first mate on the Wollongong. I shook his hand. Toby Francesco, second mate, and purser on the Jameson. Come on in. I led him to the kitchen, where we consumed our fair share of tea and pastry. I came by to ask about your exercise yesterday. Were those survival suits you were wearing? Yup. I bought the best as we could afford it. If someone goes overboard in 45-foot seas, I want to be able to recover them alive, not as shark bait. He nodded. We use strobes and helos for the same thing. We don't have a heliocopter deck. We've got a fast cutter, but nothing that would be useful in really high seas. He nodded, then changed the subject. We got a flash on your vessel, your packing heat. I nodded. Yep. We've got an international diplomatic wave on to carry 20mm electric cannon. So far we've taken out the haciendas of 4 narcotic cartels and 2 fleets of pirates with no injuries to the crew or our vessel. Oh, we had the paint chipped on our stern by some 50 calories, but that's the butcher's bill. He grinned. Nice. What rounds do you use? I replied, none of that hot stuff that chain fires or blows off in the goddamn magazines. We load standard HEI rounds. Want a tour? Damned brilliant, I would. Can I invite my cap? Sure. That way I hope he'll be a little more confident about what's under his nose. Snort. That's the idea. He's been itchy since we got the flash and found you chewing on our toes. I replied, no sense in getting fidgety about it. I'll grab my queen and we'll head for the pier. I yelled out, hey Amelia. We've got company. Want to join me in a dog and pony show? Ah hell. I was just getting comfortable. In walks a tanned vision of a cougar, a late middle-aged woman comfortable in her body, well muscled and beautiful, wearing a Bondi Beach bikini. The poor guy just let his chin drop. I gently used one finger to close his mouth. Careful, Sonny. She's live ammo. He had grace enough to blush. I unlocked the hatch to the main deck passageway, dropped down a gangway to engineering space, and loaded the ship's electrical breakers. We'd done a bit of mothballing before we left. I heard computers here, and they're coming up, booting. The consoles were coming live. I returned to main deck and escorted our guests up to our helm on top deck. They tried our state-of-the-art seats and groaned. I knew what they were using on their vessel, something like the seats on school buses, the poor scumsuckers. Come on, let's give you the grand tour. First, I want to let you know ahead of time that you're going to be envious. Sorry guys. They goggled at our quarters, most doubled in size from the design, and equipped with furniture more comfortable than any hotel I've seen. The Persian rugs about finished them off. Next, the galley, theater, rec room, exercise room, a quick peek into crew's quarters, and the museum. We spent a few hours there. Their captain said this isn't a ship of the line by any stretch. This is a yacht with teeth, isn't it? I nodded. Next came the arms locker. He noted the mortar and cases of ammunition, The .50 calories, the FLNs, the vests, and the shotguns. He said I don't want to know what's in those cases, do I? While pointing at my C4 and claymores. I'm afraid you don't unless your sleep comes easier than mine. Remember, we take out narcotic cartels for a business. That's why we run under diplomatic passports. We're mechanics. He nodded. He realized that some problems required unusual tools. After all, that's why countries had developed Marines. I understand that you turned down a much more capable ship and crew not too long ago. Yes, no question about it. The maintenance and fueling issues alone would bankrupt us eventually. The high-pressure turbocharged gas engines that the thing ran were just asking for disaster. Here, let me show you what we run. I led them down to engineering space where our big cast-iron diesel pushers lay. The Vladivostok harbor master himself said, if I got it right, that these scumsucker would last forever. He grinned and nodded. I earned my ratings on a diesel tug running just one of these. You're right, treat them right, and you've a friend for life. Do you check the sumps occasionally? I replied we run a microscope slide after each and every long voyage. He nodded. Good on you. Watch your fuel pumps, and be sure that the water pumps don't foul. They can, you know, in warm water. I noted to give the black gang a heads up on the water pumps. I thought about little bitty damned snails. Yep, they needed a PM. Thanks. Sometimes experience bites you in the butt, eh? He grinned. I left them with 10 pounds of our smoked salmon. Huh. He'd never even asked to see our cannon or fire control software. What I know. I left the systems live and came back on board to live, along with Helen. We visited the beach during the day and came back to barbecued prawns, lamb and lobster with a nice wine for just the two of us each night. We tan nude on the foredeck in plain sight of the wheelhouse of the Wollongong. What the hell, they knew the score. I probably got a thumbs up or two that I never saw. We stayed through local high summer. It was the end of February. There were so many beaches and so many restaurants in and about Sydney that, quite frankly, we gorged ourselves to sybaritic excess. It was getting to be monotonous. We needed an adrenaline shock. We needed combat or a courier job. I called our contact with the State Department and requested a high-risk, high-demand job. Well, we got one. We were to pick up a containerized remote control microsurgery platform off our dock and transport it to Qatar in the Arab Emirates as soon as possible. It couldn't be done by aircraft as others were looking for it, ready to shoot it down. It seemed that someone had an accident whom powerful people would rather memorialize than shake hands with. I accepted the job in our name. If we got 12 man-pads and a crate of replacement HEI ammo up front, as well as 2 years vessel insurance payments in recompense. We were on. We bunkered up and loaded up 2 extra fuel pods on deck. We burned diesel south, then west out of Sydney Harbor, the northwest into the Arabian Sea. Sure, we ran into rough weather. Everything was tied down, and we maxed out our diesels. We hit the Gulf of Oman and didn't slow down. Man-pads equals shoulder-fired surface-to-air missile. We damn near did an Immelman around the spur and headed due west for Qatar. We screeched into port and dropped that damn thing on the government dock, where a bunch of blue light specials and a flatbed semi-burned rubber to take it away. Catching our breath, we bunkered up and slowly steamed back to Sydney. Too bad we had to deadhead the back journey. Well, somebody needed it, and we sure as hell provided it. At least the fuel was comparatively cheap there. Since we'd never visited, we took in the Maldives and the Seychelles, out in the middle of nowhere. I've never before seen any economies so dependent on external tourism and trade. We headed back to Australia, to bunker up if nothing else. Brisbane was too hot. We'd gotten used to a nice, cool environment, but we were screwed when we hit that city. We cut it short and headed out across the Pacific with 4,000 gallons of fuel on deck in various collapsible rubber bladders. We had more than enough for the Pacific crossing. The new collection of books and movies helped with the crew's attitude. They kept themselves distracted and happy without doing anything cutthroat. Granted, for communal diversion, we continued Tai Chi every morning at dawn on the top deck, and the exercise room stayed busy. We had judo and kendo competitions. I competed in kendo, but lost. I was glad that we had that class of competitors on board. One day, while mellowing out in the hot tub, Gene asked me, "Why do you do so much for the galley?" I looked at him kind of funny, then got the idea. He thought that I was neglecting the rest of the crew. Gene, all I know is computers and cooking. If I've been neglecting the others, I need to be informed, and quickly before any resentment builds up. I can only do what I know, get it? He nodded and seemed a lot happier. I then began to get wish lists from the other department's spare sensors, another crewman for watch standing and cutting heads from engineering, a spare person for housekeeping, another trained security person for watch holding and fire control. Well, damn. We had the space since Amelia and I had shacked up. Tina and Jean had done the same. LaShonda and Carrie kept eyeing each other, but nothing seemed to gel. Carl and Janet were such a well-known pair that I expected an engagement ring to appear any day now. Caitlin was a tall blonde from Russia, trained by her mother as a sniper. She came aboard with her Dragunov rifle held tightly at her side. Having been trained by the Russian military as a security officer, she was very detail-oriented. When I presented her with her own .50 cal sniper rifle equipped with a 35-power day-night scope, she gave me a quick nod of thanks and said, "Spasibo." She insisted on reloading her own ammunition. God love her. I really admire a perfectionist. Gina was a smiling little buttercup out of Italy that was happy to sign on for housekeeping, kitchen, and bakery duties. Ted had just left the Australian Naval Service as an engineer's mate. I sent their profiles and fingerprints to Vladimir. After a week or so, he vetted them as clean and sent along diplomatic passports in their names. We had new crew members. I'm certain that the dirty scumsucker knew what he'd let me in for. I should have shot him when I had the chance. Caitlin's Tai Chi was way too smooth. She admitted to retiring from the assassin teams. Oh Lord. I asked her, "Are you sure that you want to sign on with us crazies?" She shrugged. Crazy is as crazy does. If I never have to kill anyone again, I will be quite pleased. Okay, I could live with that. Still, when push came to shove, I believe that she was the coldest professional among us. Our smiling little Gina was from a well-connected old-school family. I had a talk with her. "Gina, do you realize that this is now your family? We each own a piece of the other. We have something special here. Can you believe in this?" She nodded furiously. "We do good things, not bloody things unless provoked. This familia is our only familia, SI?" I nodded. "We are as condottieri, yet each are as captains. We know each other's moves and dance about each other in combat. Can you work with this?" She smiled brilliantly. Suddenly 2 knives appeared in her hands. Big, sharp knives. I dance with my friends and against our enemies. I joined this company with all honor. We kissed as compatriots. We did good with our little Gina. She was a cuddly little ball of razor blades. When Ted saw our machine shop with its CNC milling machine, he got a nasty little grin. "You give me the stock and engineering drawings, and I can build you anything that'll fit on the cutting table." Nice to know. I knew that our demand for milling machine bits and drills were about to increase. All the wish lists were filled before we departed for Hawaii. Another bookstore was decimated on the ship's tab before we left. We'd want reading materials. We had a long journey ahead of us. It was the second week of March. Just before we departed, we received 2 cases of what appeared to be very fine Australian wine, with a thank you note courtesy of the Australian Department of Energy, Resources and Tourism. I suppose that our reporting the police sting cleaned somebody's house or somebody's clock. The first week was pretty calm as we headed up into the equatorial doldrums. We noticed immediately when we encountered the North Pacific currents. Our progress picked up and the pitch of the engines changed. We flew as if on wings towards Hawaii with a following current. During most years, the trade currents circle around Hawaii. This year, we were guided to them. I'd never heard of anything like it before or since. It was quite an unusual year for the currents. We docked in Honolulu with over half our standard fuel reserves on board. After having had our Blackwater tanks steam cleaned, we docked and proceeded to become residents of the local sugar sand beaches. It was great not having to worry about the next cargo or where the next load of fuel was coming from. I personally owned over 700 pounds of gold, and Amelia owned nearly 500. At 16 ounces per pound and an average of $2,000 per ounce, we were quite comfortable. The ship's account was in the very comfortable range of middling 8 digits, and our insurance was paid for 2 years. I felt that we could relax in comfort. It was April 1st. Our 3 new crewmen needed some acclimatization time with us, so we scheduled a walking party about a group of restaurants and bars. We got rowdy, noisy, and happy. The happy part kept the local police off our butt, despite our tendency to goose unwary passersby. A few Japanese tourists giggled and understood we were playing Kancho Assassin. They laughed delightedly. The cops caught on and gave us a pass. Look up Kancho Assassin. A schoolgirl would act as innocent as hell, then wrap 2 thumbs around her index fingers and goose the hell out of some unsuspecting homie. Good fun. The Japanese clued in the Koreans and the Chinese. Soon nobody was safe, and everybody was playing surprise stinkfinger. God, I love a meme explosion. It's like spontaneous emotional fireworks. People just come together and have fun doing something stupid. I had survival suits made for Caitlin, Gina, and Ted. I found a sword auction. Lit attracted my attention except for one blade. I bought an old katana with separations and inclusions, just for its historical value. It must have been over 1,000 years old. I put in pride of place in our museum. I had no idea what I'd chanced into. I was quite happy to find a Buddhist temple in city. I purchased tea and biscuits, then sat and spoke with one of the monks. We had fun poking at each other. I was invited to another temple for something unusual, a display of kata. I damned near freaked Buddhist swordsman. Nothing like this had been heard of for centuries. I was determined to attend and brought my newest friend along in a transport case. The pageantry was paced, beautiful, and pulled at my heart. Soon the kata exhibitions began. I witnessed what must have been 70-year-old men dancing the katas as if they were 20-year-old athletes. I shook my head in total admiration. At the end, I was invited to make a fool of myself. I was asked to show what katas I knew. I took several deep breaths, gathered myself, and slowly danced with my new friend. We danced well together. We made allowances for each other's difficulties. Finally, I made the little hop to demonstrate the major butterfly cut and came down to rest. I closed my eyes and rested with my new friend across my thighs. I heard a shuffling before me and opened my eyes. An older monk stood before me. I looked up into his smiling face. "May I examine your sword?" I replied, "This is my new friend. I hope that you give her the respect that she deserves. She has seen many years." I presented her to him, supporting the blade by the handle and the spine edge up. He accepted my blade and carefully examined her. I watched as he carefully pulled the wooden pins fastening her to the grip. The exposed chop marks made him catch his breath. I don't know what he whispered, but the 3 monks beside him suddenly dropped to their knees. He carefully replaced the grip and pins, then conveyed her back to my hands. She is the Queen's sword, a gift to the Thai royal family some 1260 years ago. She speaks to me in the way my hands hold her, the way she bends and cuts the air. A beginner would bend and snap such a blade, but an older one, such as I, have learned to dance about her flaws, and she is gracious enough to bear with mine. It as if we are an old married couple. He nodded fast. "Balance is good." I smiled so hard tears came to my eyes. "Yes, balance is very, very good." We sighed to each other and parted. It had been a wonderful, eye-opening experience. I was glad that none of the crew were with me to witness what I had experienced. It was a very private thing. After that, I did sword katas after Tai Chi every morning, leaving the running for the younger ones. I did not try for the speed of a competition swordsmaster. My goal was smoothness and the dance. I often came out of my trance with several observers watching me, a grand smile on my face. Perhaps my fate was to become a monk. I had no idea. The idea certainly didn't repel me. There were many types of monks. That I interacted with others and the world around me. Something profound had touched me. I visited another Buddhist monastery. I had placed marbles in my shoes to alter my stance and kept my hands in my pockets. I left 4 monks with Krugerrands and white envelopes in their begging dishes. I love raising hell to do good. We paid homage to the ones gone before us at the World War II monument. We climbed an active volcano and sat at its rim, contemplating the uncontrollable power of the earth itself, watching the lava slowly swirl and bubble below us. It was truly a humbling experience. We went hunting different cultural feeds. Greek barbecue was strange. Grape leaves and vine charcoal gives the meat a strange flavor. Wrapping the meat in pickled grape leaves doesn't leave much in the way of ordinary flavors either. There were a lot of Vietnamese emigres around. They had their own restaurant presence in a big way. I don't think I'll ever appreciate nuke mamam, strong-tasting fish ketchup, but a little goes a long way in a preparation. There were so many cultures represented in Chinatown that I'm amused that someone had picked up a little of everything, stirred it together in a big pot, and spilled it out on the street to take shape. It was quite cosmopolitan. I'd never knowingly had horse flesh to eat, but I paid to attend a native luau where a pony was the guest of honor. When removed from its pit and the palm fronds unwrapped, it smelled amazingly meaty. It had an interesting taste like game. I'd hate to eat what came off of an old nag, though. I tried the steamed taro root or poi and really can't say much for it. It's a cultural thing with religious overtones. I believe that it's something like Jewish unleavened bread. It kept them alive when there was nothing else. The luau dinner ended with hapia, a thickened coconut milk thing that looked like a thick, fat, wet white chocolate bar. It was very good. Then the beer came out. Shit, but those guys can drink. I woke up flat on my back on the beach next to a train wreck that used to be a luau. I was getting too old for all-nighters. Another food that we tried and all liked was huli chicken. We bought into a big beach barbecue that was cooking what looked and smelled like barbecue chicken. Well, that's huli on Hawaii. I understood that the stuff was found everywhere people got together, church socials, bar feeds, yes. They did pig roasts just like I remembered attending as a kid. And celebrations like the 4th of July. They probably made the stuff live for wedding receptions for all I knew. You'd be walking along and suddenly you'd be salivating and wondering where that great smell was coming from. It was like a foodie ambush. I watched the surfers. I repeat, did not participate. I was too old to eat sand and seaweed or break a limb being tossed about by overenthusiastic surf. Other things we attended were beach volleyball games, always popular with the guys, a soccer match, and a baseball game. The big bowl games with all their pageantry weren't until midwinter. It was only early June. The time had flown while we vacationed in the islands, but it was time to go. I scheduled a commercial maintenance crew to give the ship what for. We had a bunkerage company give us a top-up and blessing, then it was off. We went for Panama and the canal. For such a long trip covering deep water, we again had fuel bladders secured on deck to give us a reserve. It was the middle of June. We were truly blessed. We headed southeast to catch the trades at the appropriate time and place. We turned our vessel towards the Panama Canal. The seas were kind to us, not reaching over 22 to 26 feet. Granted, our bow garden disappeared over the side much to Janet's disappointment, but we weathered things fine. Caitlin and Gina needed a bit of pharmaceutical help to get used to shipboard life on the high seas, but soon came into their own. By the time we reached Panama City, we were ready for a change in venue. We'd been over every inch of that ship more than once, and were ready to start lighting fires for something to put out. We had a screaming contest. We had a polka party. We tried a tap dance party. Never invite a karate nut to a tap dance party. We had that platform rebuilt after hitting land. It was like buying shirts for the Hulk. We docked in Panama City, got the bunkerage taken care of, and the crew fled the ship like freed animals. I shook my head. I wondered if I'd have to bail anyone out of the Hoscow. After tying up and connecting to shore services, I hit the internet to check out the hotels. I found a place named La Clementina's that looked nice. I reserved a suite for Amelia and myself. We then contracted for a security service, dressed for land, and debarked like a lady and gentleman. We were tired of the ship as well as the others, but didn't have the raw enthusiasm of the rest of the crew. It was early July. Our taxi driver didn't mind showing us around as long as the meter was running, and I didn't mind paying. We were shown a few nice places to eat and saw some beautiful beaches. That alone had us smiling in anticipation. It was pretty warm there. The temperature averaged in the low 90s during the day and mid-60s at night. The sea breezes was a wonderful palliative to the temperature and humidity. I brought up the subject of retirement with Amelia that evening over drinks. We were the oldest members of the crew. Granted, we had a few good years ahead of us, but eventually we'd want to go ashore for the last time. I'd found a couple places that felt right, but didn't understand the local language. I'd seen a place or two that I could interact with everyone, but the local racial schisms appalled me. Chile, which I loved, may seem too cool for her. We'd have to visit and see. Anyway, we sliced it. I wanted to retire with her. She agreed. We fit well together. I wanted to live somewhere with a bit of Buddhist culture. She wanted an English language environment with a local university and perhaps an art colony. Neither of us were real sun worshippers. A hot tub can be a wonderful thing when the snow is falling. We both agreed that there was nothing on earth that could force us to retire to Vladivostok. TUI. Over time, we began to integrate our lists. I needed to show her Chile, where I'd vacation with the bus. Perhaps she'd fall in love with the places I had. Perhaps I had twisted memories of the first nice place that I'd found. We'd discover it again and decide together. We were both glad that we'd had that talk. We became more comfortable with each other after that. It seemed that we were settling in for the long haul. I gave her a set of Berlitz tapes and books on English to Spanish. She gave me the hairy eyeball, then smiled and buckled into learning. Soon we were holding dinner conversation in Spanish. Many of our ports of call had been in Spanish-speaking countries, and we had yet to explore Mexico, most of Central America, and all of South America. We'd missed most of Spain, too. A much subdued crew came back on board one evening. Our Caitlin had come to the attention of a squad of Spetsnaz out getting hammered and drew their attention. Their hands became a bit too adventurous, and the biggest one went down with a split sternum and a broken pelvis. She didn't screw around. Gina started singing hee and dancing with those razors of hers. Not a one of them got away without being cut to the bone. Gene was grinning like an idiot. I think he was in love. Jim and Gina had their arms around each other and walking in lockstep. Caitlin looked vindicated. I stood there with my hands on my hips. I suppose you needed that. Her head flew up and down. She grinned like crazy. Well, good. If you keep to just beating the shit out of the idiots, we'll do fine. I patted her back. Good job. We come first, damn it. Now all of you, vamoose. They scampered away, laughing. I looked over at Amelia. We've got a right bunch of barbarians, don't we? She was standing hip-shot, leaning against a wall. Yep, but there are barbarians, I agreed. I was happy that they hadn't taken trophies. How the hell would we explain a row of Russian elite marine caps strung on a line in the mess? We returned to the hot tub. July had turned into August and was catching up on September. It was time to move on. We stocked up on supplies. Wanda, Carl, Jim, and Gina teamed up and raided the local markets, then hit a ship's chandlery for everything else we needed. After that, we headed for cooler weather. We settled in to wait for the canal to open and planned to sail to St. Petersburg, Florida. We hoped our troublesome warehouse was still standing. By rough estimate, we had about 1,000 miles left to travel. No problem. Within a few days we motored into our home mooring. It was warm, but nothing obnoxious. The ship's AC took care of the humidity and kept the temperature tolerable below decks. We had 4 zones of heating, air conditioning, and filtering due to fire concerns. We kept the gym about 15 degrees cooler than the rest of the ship. After morning Tai Chi, the bulk of the crew left in one rowdy mess to run down any easy prey, namely slower runners. I saw some of them running backwards and just shook my head. What a bunch of nuts. I, however, dressed for shore and took up a katana, then lightly dropped to the dock to a clear space. I began my katas. It had been too long. I was a bit stiff in places and had to bridge from one form to another. Soon I began to flow, though. I kept a constant, slow speed and concentrated on form. I finished with a flick and sheathed my sword, all the while looking at the horizon. I woke up to several polite claps. It seems that I'd been observed in my practice. For men, some older, some younger, politely stood at the edge of my small practice yard. I walked over to speak with them. I received 4 bows. We come from there, gesturing towards a cruise ship just down the wharf. We saw you practicing and wondered, were you at an exhibition on the islands recently? I smiled and nodded. Yes, I was permitted to be shown up by the masters. It was quite educational. They looked at each other, then the oldest resumed. You were not shown up by much. You have earned the right to wear the swordsman's black skirts or the robes of a Buddhist monk. You are unusual in your faith and abilities. I replied, balance is good. Balance is very, very good. They bowed fast, several times and left. I remained bemused. Am I enlightened? No way. Have I set foot upon the path? I hoped so. With that I shrugged my shoulders and turned towards the ship to shower and change. I called the State Department, and I called Vladimir, asking if they needed anything pressing. The State Department had a load of nuclear fuel that needed to go to the Netherlands. It was encased in a half-size shipping container. We shrugged. For 80,000 in gold Krugerrands off the books and replaced armaments, we'd get it there come hell or high water. I was informed that a few parties would rather that it went to another port, say somewhere in the eastern Baltic. I shrugged. Bring him on. We staged the manpads cases near the hatches where they could be gotten quickly. We changed the radar scan to fast and put radomes back over the Vulcans. Everything was ready. We bunkered up with reserve fuel pods, steamed up to New Jersey, and took aboard the cargo. We were soon steaming across the Atlantic. The seas came up to over 36 feet, but we expected that. We steered into the North Sea, where the weather got worse. The ship tossed like a child's toy in the toilet. Just before dawn, one morning the CIC console went off with a howl. A military jet was headed for us from what appeared to be France. I began fumbling at a manpads case when it was ripped from my hands. Catherine had it opened, operational, down on one knee and leading the target within 70 seconds. Damn, but that woman knew her shit. I saw a sheet of flame come out of the rear of the launcher, then a fireworks display some 6 miles out at sea. Quench one bandit. I patted her shoulder. Good job. Keep 'em coming. I went back to bed. Hell, I was superfluous. We steamed into Horn and dropped our freight on the dock without any hassles. It's a good thing Catherine was on the top deck with a fire control remote spotting for ambushes. We picked up a load of medical supplies and steamed away, innocent as you please. We stopped at Cuxhaven, Germany for refueling. We split the gold evenly. Our 3 new recruits were happy as hell to get nice, heavy gold coin for their efforts. Vladimir returned my call. He could use some help moving a family from Gdansk to Alicante in Spain. No problem. We decided to put them up in a crew cabin and steam through the North Sea for Gdansk. 2 parents, 3 uncles, 2 aunts, a grandmother, and 6 kids showed up. When we saw the size of the family, we opened up the old water tank for billeting and brought out some of our emergency supples for bunks. We couldn't stuff that many people into a crew's quarters. It would be inhumane. 14 would fit in the old tank with no problems. We pulled stretchers, sheets, and pillows out of emergency stores and left the hatch open and a fan in the hatchway for air circulation, or that room would have been a tomb. Carl just set up a second serving for mess for the family. It effectively doubled our onboard economy. We kept them down in the tank unseen by passers-by, aircraft, and even satellites. I'm sure that they were bored spitless, but we delivered them alive and healthy. It was a long, slow trip south, then around the Spanish peninsula into the Mediterranean basin to Alicante. September was but a memory. We stayed in town to taste the local offerings. It didn't take us long to see what we wanted. Soon we were off to Barcelona for a bigger city's offerings. After docking and connecting to port services, I used the internet to see what was to eat and not to eat. Surprise. Top is heaven. I was amused to see the list of scathing comments revolving about places where not to eat if you were starving to death. These places must have been horrible to earn the scathing comments which I read. God love them for telling the truth. Some places try to exist on reputation. Nope. Ain't gonna work. Gimme the good stuff or be missing. After our customary 3-week visit, we headed back home by way of Iceland, another place that I'd never seen before. The whole crew lined the railing watching lava flow into the sea. We took a long, leisurely trip back, staying close to the coast of North America, seeing the sights. Within a little over a month, we docked at our home port. It was the end of October. We were tired of sailing. I had a brainstorm. I informed the crew that I didn't want to spend much time at our home port, as the federal marshals and ATF were bound to be looking for a couple of stolen Vulcan 20mm rotary cannons. We'd made our round-the-world tour. Now it was time to fill in the blanks. I voted for taking another case of 20mm cannon ammunition from stores, flushing the poop tank Blackwater, taking on a load of diesel, and booking for Cuba. We liked it last time, even though only half the current crew was with us then, so we'd probably like it again. I got the support of the team. We were underway within 6 hours. During that 6 hours, I loaded the ammunition and researched where to stay in Cuba. Upon looking up high-end resorts, I came upon Veradero. I couldn't find much with a close dock for us until I used Google Maps and went to satellite view. There it was, a beautiful little cove at the end of the island, near Hotel Barcelo. Bingo! I got the hotel's number from the internet and reserved suites for the 12 of us. I only told Amelia, as she'd have to navigate into the place. Since it looked like the Bay Cove was used by a yacht rental company, I gave them a call and arranged for dock space for a 55-meter vessel us. A little gold unlocks a lot of doors. I also transferred our working capital, a little over $66 million, into my account at Bancomer, a major Mexican national bank. I'd had an account with them bearing over $1.5 million for several years by then. I wanted those funds out of the States pronto. The voyage was smooth, as travel in the Gulf usually was unless a hurricane was around to stir the pot. Navigating a vessel as long as ours into a berth without thrusters is an art form, and Amelia was practiced at her trade. There was no tug to help us, but there were a couple of guys to help us tie up. We didn't have springer poles or need bumpers. There were 3 layers of old car tires fastened to the edge of the dock. I laid out the gangway with the aid of the crane, and we were docked. I took care of the little nasties, such as securing shore power and paying the rent. There was local cell phone service. All we had to do was introduce our phones to the towers. Customs was a breeze with our type of passports. I had the ship guarded via the yacht rental place. Since he was having the basin guarded anyway, it didn't cost much over the berth rental. The resort was huge, 6 restaurants, 5 bars, and 3 pools. We shifted into vacation mode again, swimsuits or light shirts and Bermuda shorts. We began with a small celebration Cuba Libres all around to celebrate our freedom on Cuba. We agreed to hang around through the off-season, soaking in the food, culture, and sun. We also agreed to continue our morning Tai Chi and runs. Well, they'd run, I'd do kata. I convinced a few to spend a couple days a week with me learning Spanish. Amelia was happy that she could converse with the servers. Caitlin already knew Spanish, no surprise there. Dawn seemed a good time to exercise, as the crowds wouldn't notice or bother us, and it would be as cool as the days would get. I found that there was a government premium on anyone converting US dollars to pesos that bearers of other currencies were not obliged to pay. I shrugged my shoulders and brought out packs of €100 bills to pay for our expenses. Living at the resort was like being on a cruise ship. Everything was provided, and there was no reason to leave the property. As a group, we had grown used to a little more variety. We dropped the cigarette cutter into the bay and headed around the east end of the country to Havana. When we tied up across from the ferry wharf, the cops were on us like white on rice until we showed our passports and paperwork from Hotel Barcelo. Then everything was sugar and butterflies again. We took rooms in a downtown hotel for a couple of nights and wandered around seeing the sights. Whenever we saw a restaurant, we stopped in and tried the food. There were a lot of breads, a lot of grains. We hit on a barbecue place and had a good feed. I shrugged. Nice place, but I wouldn't want to live here. The income gap between the poor and the wealthy was astonishing. It was as bad as some places in the Pacific Rim. It definitely made us targets for someone desperate enough to take the chance, despite seeing cops on almost every corner. We stayed together for safety. Come the morning, we headed back to our ship. This country was dangerous for any rich tourist that didn't speak the language. It was like Istanbul or Cairo. A couple of the others had gotten that street meat vibe too. I collected all our pesos and had them converted back into euros. We split for friendlier climes. Cancun was barely a half-day's travel west. We took a chance. It was a pretty good decision. With all the resorts in the tourist-driven city, we shrugged and took the one with the goofiest name. It was fairly pricey, but had facilities on par with what we'd found in Cuba. However, this place had an open campus with regular trips for golfing, shopping, and fishing. Again, paranoid me hired a bonded security service to intercept anyone messing with our ship. The first morning after we finished Tai Chi, I started screaming and running in place. Everyone else copied me. Soon we had a bunch of maniacs screaming like hell and running in place like a souped-up '57 Chevy with the brakes locked. Then I powered off into the surf and dove in. They all followed me, laughing like hell. We were all out of breath and having the time of our life. My time on the beach watching my body follow the forms made me a little critical. I resolved to change some of the flaws that I'd felt and seen. Day by day, I tightened up my dancing the forms. I could not stop smiling at the end of each exercise. It felt so good. My blade flickered and danced about, as if it were a demented dragonfly wing. After one exercise had finished, I opened my eyes to see Caitlin watching me with an odd look in her eyes. I wish that I were that proficient, that flowing. Your morning exercises are both free-form violence and controlled poetry. She shook her head. This is what defines mastery. I wish to practice the forms with you each morning to gain skill. I bowed low, using my sword as an accompaniment to the gesture. Your wish is my command. We shall find a blade that agrees with you, then dance the katas together. She left very, very happy. Jim and Jean would watch us, trying to keep up with what we were doing. They were proficient in kendo, but had no experience in blade work or Buddhist not here. That's the hard one. The level of attention changes and reflexes become faster, more focused. I have achieved it, but a few times. Cancun was a nice diversion after our scare in Cuba. I took us across the canal to Coquimbo, Chile, where the desert reflected on the city life. It was very different. Next came Valparaiso, where life was fat and the good times rolled. This was an old tourist city and nobody screwed with the trade. It was the middle of November. We finally docked at my favorite city, Puerto Montt. The winds were cool and damp. The fish were abundant and fresh. The beaches were dark, wet pebbles. I looked up my old hosts, then paid for a rubble-filled dock to be built to accommodate the Jameson. They freaked at the size of our ship, but got used to it. We rented a section of their beach for a couple of months. I built fires on the beach as I had when I lived there. The crew came to love the bleak silence of the place, as I had once before. We did the local smoked salmon thing again, boosting local business. I talked a couple of shippers into supplying not only iced fresh salmon, but also deep smoked salmon for their international markets to be delivered to our dock. I screwed myself because it became harder to obtain after that. We smoked our own when we couldn't find the commercial product. We danced Tai Chi on the beach, being blown about by the sea breezes. My dancing gained a certain focus and grounding there. Emilia agreed this place would be a good place to retire. It all seems to come together here. I smiled. She understood. The crew seemed to back down to a lower gear, much like being at sea, yet without the stress of coping with heavy seas or watch standing. We caught up on our reading and sleep. Caitlin watched me practice forms, doing her best to mirror me as we faced each other across the beach. I had my eye on Chinchillo. According to the internet maps, about 2 miles south of the city, there was a large large to me forest butting up against the shoreline. Perhaps one day we'd build a home there. Soon, refreshed and revitalized, we steamed for a city. I'd never been to Uruguay's capital, Montevideo. We talked it over after examining a tourist guide and decided to give it a go. It would be a trip of some 3,500 miles around the south tip of South America and bypassing all of Argentina. It would take some 11 days if we didn't get pounded by the weather. If we stayed in the coastal waters, the seas wouldn't be as bad as they could be if we were out in the real open water. The trouble comes when one steams too close to shore. The rising bottom can reinforce the wave action to some truly dangerous conditions. January south of the equator reflects high summer. Montevideo has more than enough tourist attractions to keep a normal crew busy. The problem was we weren't a normal crew. Caitlin and I flashed swords about as if we were mad. The rest of the crew sang dirges as they ran furiously through the city streets in the early mornings. Bunch of wingnuts. Montevideo was a curious city. The ultra-poor seemed non-existent, or at least they were in a critical minority. It was a working city with plenty of industry and shipping, hence the localized pollution, but it was a healthy city. We searched out good places to eat and drink. We didn't limit ourselves to the high-class places either. Some of the best food I'd eaten was rubbing elbows with stevedores and container truck drivers. Making excellent chicken fried steak is an art form that many have attempted and few have mastered. A truly good short-order cook draws customers like flies on. Well, you get the idea. As a team, we hit a barpool hall with a truly great reputation for fried grouper sandwiches and deep-fried pork cutlet sandwiches with all the fixins. I shook my beer glass at Carl. A good product makes up for all the rest except for poor service. Who cares what your front end looks like? You can even make it a travesty. Truly great grub like this will always carry the day. My glass was soon filled by an attentive and attractive waitress. I smiled, leaned back and burped. This was a good day. I had a little too much to drink. I felt a bit delicate the next morning. I took steam and lots of water. By noon I was fine. I felt like a walk, so I just took off, letting my feet guide me. I stopped at a couple of street vendors that advertised tacos con cabritos, goat tacos. It was so good. Once the vendors cook the meat, it stays overheat in their trays, getting crispier and more flavorful. Good stuff. I wandered into an old Catholic church to see the stained glass, altar, and general architecture. The priest must have been bored as he approached me. "May I help you, my son?" "Father, I am not of the city and wish to find others that practice as I do. Can you point me to a Buddhist temple?" He drew back a minute, then smiled. "We each worship in our own way." "Of course." He drew out a map for me. "Thank you, Father. May your life balanced." He nodded to me and left me. On the way out, I dropped a Krugerrand in the poor box. I was halfway down the block when I clearly heard "Holy shit" from the church behind me. I smiled my evil smile. Got another one. I found the temple. It was small and old. It truly needed some tender loving care TLC. I entered and sat on my heels before the Buddha. I breathed and contemplated where I had come from, where I was, and where I was going. I rose and performed kata with my short staff before the Buddha. My focus came quickly and I danced in celebration. I felt as if I were barely touching the floor. When I finished, I dropped to sit with my short staff across my knees, supported by both hands. I felt different. Soon I felt a hand on my shoulder. I rose and turned to see an older monk, bald and wrinkled. I suspected that he hadn't a tooth in his head. I have never seen such a gift to the Buddha before. "Come, let us have tea." Well, could I say no? We sipped tea as he gathered his thoughts. We are each called to the Buddha in our own way. The warrior priest is an ancient way that is little practiced now. Zen archery is but a shadow of what has gone before. But the skill and no mind necessary to the practitioner is the same that I seek. The essence has not passed on. He bowed a bit. The old katas are different from those practiced now. I saw in your devotions things that I have not seen since I was a youth. I have no idea what changed my katas to these forms, yet they seem, right dash. They flow more smoothly than those taught to me as a green youth. He nodded. Perhaps this is how the original katas were discovered. It is of no matter. He sighed to me. "Thank you for your time." He rose and turned away, retreating back into the depths of the temple. I couldn't let this old holy man slowly fade into obscurity. I had a pocket full of Krugerrands. I dumped 22 of them into the begging bowl near the doorway, leaving me 4. I'd be that he said "Holy shit" when he found them, too. But then, being a Buddhist monk, he might have only smiled and nodded. I didn't want to leave the city without sampling what drove the tourists to come. I talked the group into a guided tour. Montevideo is flat as a pancake. The city itself is about 12 miles broad by 10 miles deep, but the shoreline is developed for a long ways up and down the coast. A mad spider's web of roads cover a wide area surrounding the city. The white sand beaches are backed by 10 to 15-story hotels. Everything was looking like everything else. We were getting museum fatigue. We needed to stop and recharge our batteries. I proposed spending Carnival in Rio de Janeiro, just up the coast, maybe 1,400 miles, all shallow water. It was the beginning of February. We had a month until Carnival ripped the top off the city. The port master had us tie up at the commercial docks on the northeast side of the city, near Cidade do Samba, Samba City. I had the tanks cleaned, the fuel topped off, and established security. We sat down in a restaurant and pored over a tourism map, supposedly highlighting things to see and do. Route 101 should have been a high-speed artery from one side of town to the other. It would have worked if there were but 1/5 of the traffic. There were a couple of bus lines penetrating the city. We looked for hotels near the beach. Our consensus was the Copacabana Palace Hotel. It was an old-style stone monstrosity, but the rooms were airy and had high ceilings. My profligate tipping made the language differences disappear. I'm a firm believer in attitude. We kept a good attitude while checking in, and it was reflected back onto us by the staff. Good people. We took a group of suites for the month with the understanding that we had to be out a week before Carnival, as all the rooms were booked well in advance. I shrugged. We had our floating home tied up in the harbor. The hotel wasn't too usurious when converting dollars to reals. Once we were settled in, we hired a small bus complete with driver. It was shopping time again. It was summer in Rio, and the girls wanted new bikinis. Who am I to complain? I picked up a couple pair of land shoes and a new pair of deck shoes. We conferred, and each of us bought a couple pair of good quality white cotton Bermuda shorts and a couple dark red cotton shirts. All the books in the bookstore were written in Portuguese, so that was a bust. We could get the New York Times, but who the hell cared what was happening in New York? Since our hotel was directly on the beach, it proved simple to get together for early morning Tai Chi. When it was my turn to lead, they all grinned and looked at each other. They knew what was coming. The tourists watching us dance sure didn't. After the last exercise, I began screaming like an idiot and running in place. They all imitated me. I sped off into the surf, sand flying everywhere, screaming like a fool. Well, I had 11 other fools screaming right behind me. Water fight. When we rose out of the surf and walked back up the beach, one of our watchers told me, "You're nuts, mate." Yeah, well, it's a healthy nuts, eh? Because of the early rising crowd, Kate and I performed katas with walking sticks. The handles were round, but the rest of the staves were oval in cross-section, like practice blades. It's hard to do forms in the sand. After several attempts, we dropped down the beach to the surf-wetted sand that was compacted. There we had the footing we needed. When we finished, we took our deceptive walking sticks into the hotel restaurant for breakfast while the others were still out running. We were standing in line to pay for our meals when a 20-something guy came in with a pistol held high. "This is a robbery. Give me everything you have." I shrugged and gave him everything I had. I wound up like a golfer and struck the inside of his elbow, the one holding the gun. His elbow separated, the gun dropped, and he stood there looking at me. "Well, stupid, you did say give you everything I've got." I leaned a little closer. "You want the rest?" He slowly sank to sit on the floor, keeping his eyes on me the entire time. I shook my head. I spit out, "Amateur." We ate breakfast for free the rest of the week. I looked at Kate. Amazing, isn't it? Instead of swords, we were carrying short staves. A sword would have taken off his arm, spraying blood everywhere and no doubt killing him. The paperwork would have been horrendous and no doubt we'd be invited to leave. Now, he will be in a cast for a couple months and back on the street. I shrugged. I guess that's good and bad. Maybe he learned something. That day I spent my time sitting on a lounger on the beach, drinking watered-down fruit juice and rum concoctions. The last few years were notable for a remarkable set of happy circumstances: being willed the bus and the explosives, getting away with the bank robbery, stopping in a trailer park with a larcenous ex-Navy sergeant as a landlord with a host of nefarious contacts, finding a 55-meter steel-hulled ship for less than a fifth of its value due to a bank's asset reduction sale, getting away with stealing 2 operational Vulcan 20mm rotary cannon. I still lie awake at night over that one, obtaining Russian diplomatic passports through a truly Byzantine fluke of fate, and what topped it all off, lucking into a competent, loyal crew that kept getting better every day. Maybe I'd write a book someday. Nah, nobody would believe it. That reminded me. I had a sword to deliver. I called the number Vladimir had left me. I wanted to deliver the sword to its legitimate owners, the Thai royal family. Vladimir seemed excited. He said he'd take care of everything. It would be a diplomatic coup to be in on the transfer. He would arrange all air transport, fueling, and negotiations with the Thai government. After packing my luggage, I took a piece of parchment into the library and did a rubbing of the sword's tang. It would leave me something to remember her by. I packed and stood ready at the international airport. An Ilyushin 2-96 landed with Aeroflot's markings. I shrugged. Biggest damn taxi I'd ever seen. I was handed aboard to see Vladimir coming down the aisle to greet me. He said, "Nazdrovia, scumsucker." I said, "Your mama." We shook hands. Then with the greetings over, we sat and waited for the fuel to be loaded, crew to get organized, the jets to spin up, permission to depart granted, and hit the sky. I'm glad I'm not a pilot. It's complicated and you aren't allowed any mistakes. We'd refuel in Cape Town, South Africa, on our way to Bangkok, Thailand. It is a journey of over 10,000 miles. Over dinner and a nice bottle of wine we talked. "You never did ask for any payment for moving that family for me. I owed a large favor and you aided me. Tell me what you would truly adore owning." I thought for a few minutes, then hit on it. Russia was known for its Baltic amber. I adore amber. Not for jewelry or inclusions, but for its lovely color. If I could have but one small panel, about 6 inches by 6 inches, that I could place before opal glass and a light, I would be a happy man. He sat back with raised eyebrows. "Interesting." He smiled. "Nature's paintbrush and canvas. Perhaps I can assist you in this. I have another idea along the same direction that I shall surprise you with." I sighed. "You and your surprises." I looked him over. "You look good. Are you exercising again?" He looked glum. "Yes, however, I will never compete again. I have some nerve damage and my speed is down." He shook his head. "All those years of training spoiled within a month. Gah, it still leaves a bitter taste." My curiosity egged me on. "Whatever did you do with those armored limos?" He smiled, showing teeth, and leaned forward, elbow on his knee. "I had them all shipped back to Guangzhou, China. Postage due, contract refused." I smiled my understanding. Thus the politics continue. We grew tired, and the stewards pulled out 2 beds for us. The crew had bunks between the cockpit and first class. I didn't even stir when we landed in Cape Town for refueling, then took off once more. We were traveling ever eastward, gaining hours. It was almost 8 a.m. when we landed. We had eaten breakfast and were both spiffed up, me in a swordsman's tunic and skirts, Vladimir in a trim black suit, looking like a step-in razor. We had an appointment with the royal court at 10 o'clock. Do I kneel before the king? No, only if you were one of his subjects. Bow low. We were admitted into the presence of the royal couple, accompanied by many, many guards. Vladimir bowed, but I sighed low. I opened the sword-carrying case and placed the queen's sword on a sword stand that someone had thoughtfully provided. I sighed again and backed up 2 steps. Two men came forward to examine the sword tip, spine, pattern, and finally the tang. They nodded to the king and reassembled the old lady. I sighed, sorry to see her leave me. The king must have picked up on this. It is said that you are Buddhist and a swordsman. You have taken up this sword before several monks and done well. I would see this. I smiled at him. A tear ran down my cheek. I would dance with her once more. I took her up and retreated to the center of the presentation hall. I closed my eyes and began kata. It was like no time passed. When I opened my eyes, I met many others on me. The room was quiet. I rose and returned the lady to her sword stand, sighed, and retreated 2 steps. The old king said, you bring life to Buddhism. This is good. I nodded and replied, balance is good. Very, very good. We sighed each other, and our party was escorted out of the presence. As Vladimir and I walked back to our limo, he was quiet. On our way back to the airport, all he said was, I am guilty of avarice. You have depths that I have not seen before, my friend. I replied, when I was younger, I learned in anger. I later learned that anger stifled my skills. I left it for a long while. Now it comes back to me in ways that I could not have imagined 40 years ago. He asked of my life aboard ship. I acknowledged that Kate was learning the sword from me. He shook his head. She shall be formidable if she learns calm. I thought it a cutting comment. Amelia was doing much better, and we were a thing. He puckered his eyebrows. Thing. I crossed my fingers. Oh. I returned the volley. So, and you? You getting a leg over? He smiled and rubbed his middle right finger under his nose, a universal gesture among Lotharios. We had lunch and watched a stupid movie, then went to bed. When we landed for fuel, we rose and had a small dinner. I commented, this cannot last. It is too perfect. The universe abhors perfection and a vacuum. He shrugged and smiled. We ride the wave. When it hits the beach, our ride is over. Such is the game. The sea is there for the next rider. I nodded and smiled. Very good. A good attitude for a lion tamer, eh? He shrugged and closed his eyes to nap. When we landed, we shook hands. Maybe again sometime. Maybe. I picked up my suitcase and descended the ramp. I wondered why customs was so easy. They didn't open a thing, just waved me through. I got back to the hotel and got mobbed. Amelia grabbed my ears and got my attention. Toby, did you know that you were being filmed? It went out over all of Thailand, Burma, Cambodia, Vietnam, and most of India. They're showing it on the sports channel every 12 hours. Aw shit. Maybe I'd have to retire early. Sigh. I talked it over with Amelia. This was the beginning of the end. I didn't want to be a victim of gunfighter syndrome, where every new face had to measure themselves against the old timer. I couldn't deal with a sword thrust to the back out of nowhere. The king had stolen my anonymity. The king had stolen my balance. I was not happy. I contacted a lawyer in Chinchillo, Chile about leasing the property I'd seen online. He laughed at the idea, as the family that owned the property was quite insular and noticeably unforgiving of foreigners. I mentioned a 25-year lease for 10 million pesos, and things eased up considerably. Soon I had the lease. Next, a road was put in from the northernmost edge of the property to within a quarter mile of the center of the property. I contracted for a sweet well to be dug and a massive 1-story house built of local stone with walls approaching 3 feet thick. I wanted this place to be earthquake resistant. The trees cut down to clear the road and building site were sent to a sawmill, where they were kiln dried and cut for various things the architect envisioned. The house was a bit up the hill from the beach. Closer to the water stood a small, 3-sided stone shelter with a fireplace before it. The wet rocks that made up the beach were of many subtle colors. A small dock led out into the waters. I kept a 30-foot motor launch to get me to town and back, but no car or truck. I took a trip to South Africa to buy up most of an English-language bookstore. Well, it seemed like it at the time, and had everything shipped back to Chile, marked for delivery to my dock. I spent a few days on the sand beach feeling like a dried-up old man. Upon returning home, I decided that I was too rich and too stubborn to cook and do housekeeping. I contacted a bonded, insured employment agency. I described my situation and requested a calm older mother that would enjoy a simpler life. There were 3 bedrooms, so space was not an issue. Monica and I clicked. We had groceries delivered to the dock every week. A little propane-powered forklift got the goods to the house. I bought her a little hardtop Jeep to get around in. The days passed, the months passed, the seasons passed. The Jameson dropped anchor off my little place, and the cutter came to dock. The house was suddenly full. Amelia hugged me. We want you back. It just isn't the same without you. I slowly shook my head. I explained that I'd lost my fire and was ready for the slower life. She cried on my shoulder. When I'm ready, I'll come back for you. I replied, don't take too long. I hugged the women and shook hands with the men. They left me with a package. It held the swords, another package from Vladimir, the C4, detonators, and hand dynamo. I grinned. Anyone want to go fishing? Vladimir's package was heavy for its size. It held 3 6x6-inch amber panels and 10 ultra-thin sawn pieces of mineralized wood, often called petrified wood. Each sample was secured between 2 sheets of glass. The light gleamed through them as I held them up to the sun. He had come through for me. Thank you, Vladimir. I had bought into a sat phone and used it for digital connectivity. Yes, it was quite expensive, but it gave me a keyhole to the outside. I downloaded and watched my performance before the royal family. I was good. No wonder Vladimir was pissed. It reminded him of what he'd lost. Well, I'd done what I set out to do. I retired south of the border. It was one hell of a ride, but I'd done it and lived to tell the tale. I still do some Tai Chi on the beach to stay limber. I cannot say that I have a purpose anymore. Perhaps I have become that oddball monk that I dreamed about years ago. I think I'll go watch the fire and listen to the ocean. I can't think of anything finer to do. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.